Okay, so this video is coming out a week late. This is my video looking at the anniversary update for Broken Arrow. Now, this update came out on June 2nd. I was originally going to post this video last Saturday, but I couldn't get it out in time, and then I just decided to wait because I figured that a hotfix or two was going to be coming out in the meantime, or at least some post addressing some of the more interesting concerns about the update, but we will get into that eventually. Now, it's called the anniversary update, but hang on, there we go. It's also referred to as update 1.0.1, 1.1.0.3, so. Anyway, anniversary update. Forward. For the past 3 months, I don't know why everyone calls says the PTE lasted for 3 months. It only lasted for just over 2. It started April 22nd and ended June 27th. That's just a hair over 2 months. Anyway, I'm sorry, it's a nitpick. For the past 3 months, the PTE has been running what was initially supposed to be a shorter 2 or 4 week test that ended up creeping in scope, with some features needing time to be refined and players requesting balance changes in the meantime when it wasn't our initial goal. As a result, we ended up splitting the community into 2 groups not really playing the same game and becoming less and less compatible with each other as time passed. So some preferring PTE, others preferring the live version. All agreeing that no version is perfect, but that keeping both is detrimental. The objective of this patch is to reunify our community back into a single version. We have heard the feedback from players who actively participate in the PTE, as well as those who were disappointed by it and went back to the live version. This patch is not the removal of one version or another, it's a fusion of both, a new shared foundation for future improvements. User interface. Return to battle group time is now displayed in the statistics card of a unit. Automatic weapons damage is now expressed per second. Added a timer animation when infantry exits a transport. Added a low altitude flight indicator for helicopters. And defensive smoke ability deployment delay is now feedbacked on the label of the unit. And then there's a note here, this delay is not new, only the visual feedback. You cannot use smoke at the last moment. Grenades take a short time to deploy, and when missiles lose track of the target, they don't instantly crash to the ground, and there is a chance that they randomly hit the target through the smoke. Because smoke is not cover. Smoke is concealment. Smoke just keeps the enemy from seeing you. It does not keep anything from hitting you. Although I do want to demonstrate this. Grab that. Go over here. Because they have the new timers. Here we go. And I really like the way they actually did the timer here, if I'm going to be entirely honest. I like the concept of a return to deck timer. But the way they did it in the PTE was very confusing. However, here, I think they laid it out very, very well. Because you have a value for if you just tell the unit to RTB by themselves, if the unit is completely out of ammo, or if the unit has been completely destroyed. Now, for most of these, the value for when the unit's out of ammo, excuse me, and when the unit has just been told to RTB is not all that much. For example, for tanks, it's not all that much. Usually it's a couple seconds more. That's about it. That's like 10 seconds more. Even something like this is, heck, it's not even 10 seconds. For mortars, it is a little bit higher, but I'll get on to that in just a minute here. Because, actually, that's a point. Where is the Viper? There's the Viper. What is the value given here? That's like a 20-second difference. Okay. Actually, that is a point. What if we just go full ordnance? That's still like a 25-second difference, give or take. Okay. Now, the value difference in between the unit being unscathed and the unit being out of ammo, that really applies, from what I can see, mainly to things like artillery and aircraft. Because with artillery, firstly, you'll notice that the return to deck time for artillery is just long in general. And we're going to come back to it later, but this is part of what they're doing to try and balance artillery. So, but if you were to go to some aircraft like this, with 4 Mavericks, you'll note that the unscathed time is very low, but the out of ammunition time is like 6 minutes 15. Mind you, if the aircraft was destroyed, then that timer goes up to like 8 minutes 15. And then there's some technical changes here. I'm not really going to go into the technical changes all that much. I imagine if people wanted to actually look at the technical changes, they can pause the video right now. But I'm not going to cover the technical changes all that much. I'm also not going to cover the map changes that much, because honestly, I don't play multiplayer, so I never... It never interested me all that much to... Or the multiplayer side of balance changes never really not balance changes, but the multiplayer side, the multiplayer aspect, or anything multiplayer related in these patch notes never really interested me. One thing I will say though is that with Oil Rush, because when they first showed it off in, if memory serves, the lead up to the November 2024 beta, Oil Rush had a lot of capture zones, and they were primarily grouped either in the refinery itself or in the urban center. And there's only like 1 or 2 in between the two. So it's interesting that they're grouping everything around the urban center and putting nothing around the refinery. I'm genuinely wondering why, because well. And they've also changed the layout for Highway of Death as well. Economy and victory points. So the unit upkeep has been slightly reduced, but they specify multiplayer, and I'm not entirely sure if this... I'm not sure why they specified multiplayer. I would appreciate if they actually specified whether or not this doesn't apply to things like campaign or scenarios. This will make the game more dynamic with more units present on the battlefield. Excuse me. It will also reduce a bit the efficiency of suicidal spam tactics and make the calculation of how much upkeep a unit costs easier. Take the unit price, divide by 10, then divide by 2. This is the upkeep value. So, okay, so take the unit price, divide by 10, and then divide by 2. Or just divide by 20. Although dividing by 10 and then dividing by 2 would be significantly easier. Is that a winch? That is a winch. Okay. Anyway, so basically divide by 10 and then divide by 2, so the upkeep value for this is 10 points. The upkeep value for this is 17.5 points. The upkeep value for this is 6 points. Killing your own units or ally units now counts in the destruction score. We initially didn't count that to limit the power of Nuisance of Griefers, but this was exploited by players who killed their own units on purpose to avoid giving destruction scores to the opponent, while also favoring quote-unquote danger close bombing, especially nukes, because only enemy losses would count in the case of friendly fire. And then they have this next sentence in big bold text. We remind all players that team killing allies on purpose is punishable by temporary ban, and that repeated offenses can lead to a permanent ban. So avoid blue on blue as much as you can, apologize in case of mistakes, and if you're overwhelmed and friendly fire is acceptable, the code word is easy to remember. It's Broken Arrow. Now, technically they are correct. The term Broken Arrow has 3 meanings. The one that people are probably thinking of the most isn't actually correct, because there seems to be a general consensus, or maybe not general consensus, but a popular belief that the term Broken Arrow refers to a stolen nuclear weapon. No. The term Broken Arrow refers to a nuclear accident that does not run the risk of causing a conflict. So basically an airplane crash. Actually, this is actually an airplane, or the crash of an aircraft carrying a nuclear weapon is responsible for a significant number of the Broken Arrow incidents the US military has on record. Now there is a term for a lost or stolen nuclear weapon, and that is the much more innocuous sounding empty quiver. And in case you're wondering, there is also a term for an accident involving a nuclear weapon that could result in a nuclear war, and that is called nuke flash, NUCFLASH. Like, for example, the accidental launch of a ICBM. However, the term Broken Arrow that they're using here refers... Well, if you've ever watched the movie We Were Soldiers and you saw the part where they called Broken Arrow, that's pretty much what they're talking about here. The term is, and I want to look this up because I want to make sure I'm not going to get it wrong, a code phrase summoning all military aircraft to the area to provide immediate support of ground forces about to be overwhelmed. So, like I said, if you watch We Were Soldiers, you understand what the term Broken Arrow means. Also, there is a third meaning that is specific to Native Americans. And Broken Arrow, or breaking an arrow, is a term of peace, and is basically like a signal that conflict is over, that it is time to lay down or put away weapons. Although my understanding of Broken Arrow, or not Broken Arrow, of Native American culture is limited, to say the least. Anyway, gameplay. Our objectives of this patch are: finalize the changes from PTE which were received positively and integrate them into the main branch environment. Reinforce the Russian faction, whose win rate is inferior to the US faction at the moment. Reinforce the Baltic Battalion specialization to make it more appealing. They use the term faction here. Like, I guess they don't want to use the word nation because they don't want to make it too realistic, but I'm just going to say nation. Or just say Russians and US. Although, I'm sorry, everyone talks about how, the US has a 53% win rate, Russia sucks. You know, a couple months after the game came out, Russia had a 53.5% win rate. And then they tried to balance, I think it was update 1.0.11, that they tried to balance it, but they overcorrected in the US's favor. So, and okay, yes, update 1.0.11 was came out in October, which was 9 months ago, but yeah, I know the development team is slow at actually working on patches for the game, but this is a AAA studio, and they do have other things they need to work on. Anyway, anti-aircraft, or aircraft/anti-aircraft. Objectives: improve the anti-overkill mechanic to make it less frustrating, reinforce the place use of fighter jets as part of an air defense network, reduce the amount of airstrikes to give more reduce the amount of airstrikes to give more breathing room to ground battles. Excuse me. Changes. Anti-overkill system improved. The probability to hit targets using flares is correctly calculated. Launchers located close to the target have a priority to shoot over those located further away. SAMs auto-protect themselves by retargeting their missiles on seed missiles, targeting them. Heavy SAM delay between missiles increased from 2 to 3 seconds to 3 to 4 seconds. With the anti-overkill allowing more missiles to be fired, SAM's efficiency literally skyrockets, leaving no possibility to use planes, so the rate of fire has been reduced to balance that. It also means that while 2 seed missiles are fired in quick succession at a SAM, it will never be able to intercept the second one on its own. A small extra range versus seed missiles has been added to SHORAD units with the shortest range to act as a buffer in case of high network lag and to help with interception. So the only SHORAD systems that I know of that have the shortest range, and this is what I assume they're talking about here, because they don't specify units, is the ZSU-23-4 in Coastal, the Centurion C-RAM, as in C-RAM, in Striker Cav, and there was one other radar-equipped gun-based system. I'm pretty sure there was one other radar equipped gun-based system, but I don't remember what it was. Oh yes, I remember now. It's the PVADs. The Shilka, the C-RAM, and the PVADs. And I suppose you can make an argument for the Bradley M-SHORAD with the Hellfires. Says the Hellfires cannot engage missiles. So that leaves the cannon range. Huh. The high altitude range is apparently 1,500 meters. Where's the Striker M-SHORAD? Okay. No, nothing there. PVADs, no. No, that's 1,300 as well. Why'd they up the high altitude range so much? Also, one thing that I'd be very interested to know is if the range increase given to weapons when the radar's active applies to guns as well. Because that would theoretically mean that the guns on the Tunguska M and the various M-SHORADs would be engaging targets, high altitude targets out to 3 kilometers. Although in reality that would only affect the Tunguska M, because the ones in the M-SHORADs can't engage fixed-wing aircraft. Which, I mean, it makes sense. The M230 isn't necessarily a traditional anti-aircraft gun, quote-unquote. It's not very... It's not high velocity, to my understanding. Oh, okay, I did that. Let's see, where was I? All missiles associated with shore vehicles equipped with a radar can intercept SEAD and cruise missiles, exception of Hellfire missiles, which are too slow to intercept, but can target ground vehicles instead. Now, originally I was going to, at the end of this video, I was going to pull out the M-SHORAD and demonstrate that in a scenario. And I say demonstrate that specifically. I was going to demonstrate that the M-SHORAD is capable of fully intercepting an entire strike package from an F-15EX. And when I say entire strike package, what I mean is taking 3 JASSMs and 4 HARMs. This loadout specifically. It is capable of eating the entire thing. However, seeing as the update has been out for a little bit over a week, I think that's generally common knowledge at this point, so I'm not going to do that. And when I say it's capable of eating the entire thing, what I mean is with the Fletcher rockets, it's capable of eating the entire thing. With nothing but the Fletcher rockets. That I will be demonstrating at the end of this video. And when I say eating the entire thing, I mean it shoots down everything. I know I've used the term eaten to imply that something gets destroyed by something else. But using nothing but the Fletcher rockets, the M-SHORAD, or the Stryker M-SHORAD can shoot down everything that an F-15EX can throw at it. It is dumb in a very funny way. Self-propelled anti-aircraft guns with radar. The turret rotation speed has been increased to help interception, which is interesting because I thought the turret rotation speed was actually pretty snappy on its own. Well, for note, SHORAD ability to intercept SEAD has been reinforced to compensate for heavy SAM becoming more vulnerable to SEAD. I assume by heavy SAM that they're referring to HIMARS systems that have the same range against both low altitude and high altitude targets, and that can't intercept helicopters. Honestly, I wish they would just use the term HIMARS instead of SHORAD. But to be fair, in between the term SHORAD, or short range air defense, and HIMARS, or high to medium range air defense, I'm pretty sure SHORAD is the much more common term, the term that people know more than HIMARS. Intercept SEAD, compensate for heavy SAM becoming more vulnerable to SEAD. We want to reinforce the idea that air defense is a network with multiple layers, fighter jets, HIMARS, and SHORAD. One thing that I honestly appreciate about this game, just in general, is that surface-to-air missile systems can intercept SEAD in the first place. Because I have heard accounts from an actual U.S. Army air defender who spent 10 plus years operating the Patriot system that, yeah, you can intercept anti-radiation missiles with the Patriot system. In fact, as he put it, if he sees a blip on his radar that then releases a smaller blip, and that smaller blip starts heading straight for him, he knows that's probably an anti-radiation missile, and he is perfectly capable of knocking that thing out of the sky. So I honestly, like I said, I do appreciate that air defenses in general can shoot down SEAD missiles. In fact, I'd like to point out that one of the reasons why where is it? There it is. One of the reasons why the Panzer system was developed in the first place was to protect S-300 and S-400 batteries, although I don't think the S-400 was created at the time against air attack up to and including attack from anti-radiation missiles. That was one of the reasons why the Panzer system was developed in the first place. Anyway, I digress. Ballistic missiles are not targeted during the ascending phase anymore. First third of their trajectory to avoid losing interceptor missiles that wouldn't be able to reach them. Technically, ballistic missiles flight can be divided up into 5 phases: launch, boost, apogee, separation, and terminal. I'm not entirely sure what separation does, but launch is the missile launch. Boost is when it's climbing, which is what they're referring to here when they say ascending phase. Apogee is when it's at the top of its arc, and then terminal is when it's basically coming down on the target. I assume separation might refer to if, say, the missile has a cluster warhead, then it would open up and start releasing the various bomblets during the separation phase. But you don't necessarily want to do that too high, or the spread of the various submunitions is going to be far wider. It's going to be very, very wide, and you're not actually likely to destroy your target. It's kind of like doing long-range shooting with a shotgun. SHORAD units cannot intercept ballistic missiles anymore. Only long-range HIMAD can now intercept ballistic missiles. So, okay, so funny story here. I have known that SHORAD systems can intercept ballistic missiles since February. And I found out in probably one of the most hilarious ways possible. Because I was just messing around on a scenario. And specifically, I was messing around with the Prism. And I was shooting at some Russian units I had pre-placed, including a AZSU-23-4. And now it had the Iglas, but I was noticing that the missiles were not actually destroying the ZSU-23-4. I don't know if it's called Shoga or Shilka. It looks like Shilka, but I've heard people pronounce it Shoga, so anyway. I noticed that it wasn't actually destroying this thing, and so I was getting kind of confused, like, what's going on? The guns, only the guns, not the missiles, only the guns, was intercepting the ballistic missile right before it hit the ground. Now, the missile was being fired directly at the 23-4, and so, excuse me, so there was no, like, this was purely self-protection, okay? This wasn't even point defense. It was purely self-protection. But the guns were shooting the ballistic missile down right before it hit the 23-4. That was incredibly funny for me to discover. Anyway. While this might look like a buff to ballistic missiles, that actually prevents air defense from wasting missiles in situations where interception was impossible anyways. And then they made some changes to HIMAD here. Air-to-air missile aim time reduced from 1 second to 0 seconds. HIMAD specifically, it says SAM, but it's referring to HIMAD specifically. Aim time reduced from 1 to 2 seconds to 0 seconds. And the HIMAD ranges have been reduced proportionally to the aim time reduction. The range reduction corresponds to the missile flight distance during their former aim time. As a result, ground attack planes heading towards the SAM are intercepted at the same distance as before, while fighter jets can loiter closer to the front line and fire their missiles faster without flying as much in the direction of enemy air defenses. So, what I assume this means is that, for example, to use the PAC-2 as an example, if a jet was fired previously with the old aim times, if a jet was flying directly towards the PAC-2 and it started aiming, excuse me, the missile wouldn't actually be fired until the aircraft was 3,600 meters away. That's what I think they're talking about. So what they've done, and this might actually have more of an effect on the on whether or not the radar's on. So what they, because I noticed that it's not a constant reduction value. Like, it's reduced by 300 meters here, 300 meters here, 400 meters here, 400 meters here, 300 meters here, 300 meters here, and then only 200 meters here. So the values are close, but it's not a constant value. Anyway, so the range has been reduced from 4,500 meters to 4,200 meters for the S-300V4 with the, let's see if I remember this correctly, 9M82MD missiles. Is that right? 9M82MD. Where is Mech? There's Mech. 9M82. Yes, 9M82MD. Okay, good. I actually got that right. The range for the S-300P M2 with the 48 and let's see if I can remember this right. 48 and 6. Oh shoot! There's another character after 48 and 6 something. N6P-01. Okay. Has been reduced from 4,300 meters to 4,000 meters. The range of the PAC-2 and either the S-300V4 with the 9M83M or the S-300 or the S-300PM with the 48N6 missiles has been reduced from 4,000 meters to 2,600 meters. The range of the PAC-3 MSC and the S-350 with the 9M96M missiles, I believe, we'll check that in a minute, has been reduced from 3,600 meters to 3,200 meters. The range of the PAC-3, that's the base PAC-3, not the MSC. The S-350 with the 9M96 missiles and the Book M3 have been reduced from 3,200 meters to 2,900 meters. Is that right? Yes, 9M96 and then 9M96M. Oh, good grief. The range of the NASAMs with the AMRAAM ERs in the Book M2 has been reduced from 3,000 meters to 2,700 meters, and the range of the IRST has been reduced from 2,800 meters to 2,600 meters. HIMAD with cold launch vertical shooting, so the S-300, the S-350, but I believe this also includes the IRST. Main engine activation delay reduced from 1 second to 0.6 seconds, allowing them to intercept planes and missiles at ranges more similar to hot launch missiles. Hot launch means that the main engine activates from the start. Cold launch means that the main engine activates after the ejection phase. Now, honestly, if you've ever seen a cold launch system activate, it's actually pretty cool. because what happens is when the missile is erected and it goes to fire. Here we go. When the launcher is erected, the missile does not automatically leave the tube. It doesn't leave the tube the way you might think it does. There is a gas generator. I believe it's referred to as a cold gas generator, but I'm not entirely sure why it's cold specifically. Anyway, I digress. But there's a gas generator, and the missile is sort of like puffed, for lack of a better term, out of the tube. It goes up, and then the rocket motor fires, and then it launches to go do whatever it has to do. So, watching a cold launch system activate is actually kind of cool. Now, I think the IRST is technically a cold launch system as well. I'm not actually sure about that. It might not be cold launch, because a vertical launch is not exclusively cold launch. And in fact, I note that there's a notable amount of space between the bottom of each one of the canisters the missile is in and the ground, so it might not actually be a cold launch system. But now, vertical launch systems are not exclusive to using cold launch. For example, a number of vertical launch systems. I know that the Mark 41 vertical launch system used in U.S. Navy warships is not a cold launch system. It is a hot launch. And it's actually really cool if you watch that launch too, because if you look at if you look up a picture of a missile being fired from a Mark 41 VLS, you have the missile, which is like halfway coming out of the tube, and then there's just this curtain of flame behind it. And the reason why is because there is a system of ducts inside the cell, for lack of a better term, that redirects all the hot exhaust produced from the rocket motor firing. And if you look at your standard 8-pack cell, for lack of a better term, I'm not sure if cell refers to like the individual grouping of 8, or if cell refers to the individual canister that the missile's packed into. But if you look at your standard, again, cell, for lack of a better term, of 8 missiles, you have you have 2 sets of doors, 4 on one side and then 4 on the other. And then you have, in between them, if I'm not mistaken, you have this long, thin hatch. And this long, thin hatch, it covers the opening to that ductwork. And that's where the curtain of fire comes from when the missile's launched. Now, I haven't been on board a U.S. Navy warship. Well, I've been on a couple, but those are from World War II. But, so I haven't been able to inspect a Mark 41 VLS system myself, so I could be getting everything wrong there. But what I do know is that those missiles, the missiles that come out of that, are hot launched. There is a series of ducts that redirect the exhaust from when they are fired, and and if you look up pictures of it, it is really cool looking, because you have the missile halfway out the tube, and there's just this curtain of flame that is behind that, silhouetting it, and it just looks neat. We reduce the with the reduced range, the delay for cold launch becomes more impactful and requires to be reduced to maintain the ability to intercept seed missiles. I've seen a lot of people complaining that cold launch systems are not as responsive as hot launch systems. And for the game itself, that is probably fairly accurate. but in reality, there really isn't that much of a difference between the responsiveness for cold launch and hot launch. Especially when you consider that a lot of the cold launch systems, like the S-300, the S-400, and whatnot, are supposed to be fired against aircraft that are a very long ways away. I'd like to point out that, according to the Russians at the very least, so take this with an entire quarry's worth of salt, the S-400 has a maximum range of 250 miles. For reference, the PAC-2 Patriot has a maximum range of approximately 100 miles. The SM-6, fired by U.S. Navy warships, has an official maximum range of 130 nautical miles, so about 140-ish land miles. That's actually a point. What is the conversion value for nautical miles? Length, centimeters, nautical miles, regular miles, 130. So 130. Well, no, then hang on. That's 130. Okay, so 150 land miles. Well, it's described as 130 plus nautical miles, but I digress. But for a lot of Russian systems like the S-300, the S-400, they're supposed to be engaging things at long distance. Now, whether or not the radar has the fidelity and whether or not their radars have enough fidelity to actually see those things is an entirely different matter. Because when it comes to a radar, you can either have a radar that sees things a long ways away, or you can have a radar that sees things really, really well. It's like okay, yeah, sure, you can see something a long ways away, but you're going to be looking at it with 144p resolution, or you could be seeing things that are slightly closer with like 4K resolution. Think about it like that. Or you could just build a much more powerful radar that can kind of do both, but you're generally not going to be using that for a mobile ground-based surface-to-air missile system. That's the kind of thing you might expect to see either on a warship, like the AN/SPY-1 or the AN/SPY-6 radars on U.S. Navy U.S. guided missile destroyers, or maybe ground-based radar systems. So something like Aegis Ashore, which still uses the AN/SPY-1, or either the AN/SPY-1 or the AN/SPY-6. Because, okay, yeah, sure, you, like, shooting out to 250 miles is great and all, but if the only thing you can see at that range is a giant, fat, lumbering, strategic cargo aircraft, that's not really going to help you. If you're only going to see aircraft like an F-15 or an F-16 at 80 miles, well, that doesn't really, like, a 250-mile range doesn't really help you there. Especially when you consider that the range of something like an AGM-84G is 160 miles, and you might not be seeing that until it's like 30 miles away, and it's coming at you at several times the speed of sound. Let me reiterate. The Pantsir was designed to protect S-300 and S-400 batteries from... the Pantsir was basically designed to provide point defense for S-300 and S-400 batteries, including protection against anti-radiation missiles. So, yeah, there's a reason why the Russians developed an entirely new anti-aircraft weapon system, specifically, or at least in part, to counter anti-radiation missiles. But I digress. Planes reaching red stress, so panicked, level gain a smaller accuracy penalty from missiles from -50 to -40. Panicked. So there's 3 levels of stress. There's calm, there's stressed, and there's panicked. Calm is normal, stressed is orange, and panicked is red. Panicked planes suffer from a larger dispersion when they drop bombs from plus 50 to plus 100. Bombers managing to drop their bombs after taking a hit will be less accurate, while fighters will remain a bit more efficient after being hit. Plane launch cruise missile aim time reduced from 3 seconds to 1 second, with the exception of the KH-102 and the Tu-160, to avoid selling the plane instantly. All smart bomb aim time reduced to 1 second. Planes do not start aiming before reaching the correct altitude when using smart bombs and cruise missiles. The aim time made the ergonomics worse, with more cases where the plane had to loop around. This was a temporary solution to prevent these weapons from being used from low altitude. Now that we have a technical solution that we can, now that we have a technical solution to that, we can lower the aim time to improve the ergonomics. One thing I noticed when I was running my testing with the Striker M-SHORAD is it appears that planes can only launch cruise missiles when they're at high altitude now. Which I thought was kind of weird. Guns, rockets, and air-to-ground missiles mounted on planes are now fired automatically without requiring a strafe order. Which I think can be very, very useful. Excuse me. The KH-38 and the AGM-65 Maverick missiles cannot reacquire targets anymore if they lose track. The KH-29 is now working as an air-to-ground missile that can target both vehicles and infantry. Close air support planes' turn speed has been increased, so this includes the A-10, the various Harriers, the various X-25s, the Yak-38, and the Albatross. The AC-130 and the KC-130 Griffin missiles are now functional and dropped automatically when flying over a target. I will demonstrate that one in a moment. The AC-130 and the KC-130 Hellfire missile rate of fire increased, and small bombs' minimum drop length has been reduced. This is an important change helping close air support planes like the A-10 or the X-25 to be really useful in the game. It makes the ergonomics of strafe runs simpler. Excuse me. It makes the ergonomics of strafe runs simpler, as you can simply click on the target and the plane will attack it with its guns and rockets. Using the strafe command is still possible to target suspected enemy positions. The AC-130 and the KC-130 also benefit from this new feature by allowing previously underused munitions to be dropped automatically. Now, here's the reason why I like this. Because, firstly, I say why I like this. This specifically referring to the change they made to the KC-130. Firstly, I'd like to point out that the Griffin missiles on the AC-130 were already functional. And I know this because I played the zombie scenario enough to actually witness them being fired on multiple occasions by AC-130s at ground targets. So, what I am going to demonstrate is that these are now functional on the KC-130 as well. Because for a long time, the missiles on the KC-130 just didn't work for some reason or another. Actually, now that I'm here, I'm going to take the opportunity to test a couple other things. So, grab a helicopter. Grab a CH-53K. Actually, you know what? No. Yes, I'm picking helicopters that I like specifically instead of just a helicopter, because why not? And then grab... no, I want... Where's the AMPV? There's the AMPV. And then I need some infantry. I'm actually going to see something here. Right. Make that invisible, make that invisible, make that invisible. Go to the script editor. Disconnect all of that, so none of that will become visible. And then grab the Harvest Hawk. Make that visible. And then make both of these visible. So I can demonstrate this. Yes.
Venom at your command.
Stop.
Roger. Retaliate only.
Fine. I didn't think it was within Rocket's range. I knew everything else would be within Javelin range, but I didn't think they were in Rocket's range. Let me do this again.
The Venom is in the air.
Stop. Anyway.
Hercules ready.
Let me demonstrate this.
Changing course.
Because I think it's cool. Hang on. Did the other one? Where's the other one? I thought I hit return to editor. Apparently I did not. Nope, that is saying that it is visible. So why is it not? Anyway, let's just grab this and move it over here. All right.
Snipers standing by.
Anyway,
Herc copies. Go ahead.
let's demonstrate this because I like it.
Let's get a better picture.
Also, I know that the landing lights are on, which is not something you would expect them to be on in a combat zone. Also, yeah, I don't know why the Hellfire rack is over here when it should be over here, but it's a minor bug. It doesn't really affect anything. Oh. Well, I mean, that works. But you can see it launching the Griffins. I am so happy this works. Don't understand why the zombies aren't visible. I mean, they were visible last time I tested this.
Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. Quick like.
I think I know what I did wrong. I'm pretty sure I know what I did wrong. Yep. I set their presence probability to 0 instead of their ammunition. That's what I did wrong. Anyway, let's do this again.
Hercules here. Go ahead.
There we go.
New course set.
I mean, at this point, this is really only for formalities because I've already demonstrated that it works now, and I am so happy that it works now. Although another thing I wanted to see about,
Scout team ready.
they added a timer when infantry gets in and out of transports. Ah, there's the timer.
At your command. Personal carrier here.
Okay, that's neat.
Scout team standing
So
by.
did they add it for helicopters? Also, you'll note the little symbol as the helicopter lands.
Venom reporting in. Flying under radar. Get out! Go! Go! Go!
Oh, they did. Nice.
Your eyes and ears, sir.
And they've also, they said they added a timer for smoke.
Deploy!
Oh, you can see it there.
Venom awaiting mission. Scouts here.
Also, why is the resupply symbol showing up? Don't know. Anyway, that's what I wanted to demonstrate. Come on. The Steam overlay does not want to work while it's in loading mode. There we go. Where was I? Yeah, okay, I was right here. And the KH-38 and the Maverick. They changed those and they changed the KH-29. Okay. No, wrong one. Wrong tab in general. I want VDV. I want airborne infantry. I want all aircraft. Where is the Su-30SM? Yes, this thing has a KH-29. Okay, so these are regular missiles instead of cruise missiles. I have seen at least one person complaining that they didn't make them cruise missiles, or that these aren't cruise missiles anymore. And I guess they could add an alternate version that are cruise missiles, but I don't know. I don't suppose it's that big of a deal. 26 damage, 50 millimeters pen. They're not top attack. I'm genuinely curious how effective these things would be against something like tanks. I could probably test that out, all things considered. Yeah, but they look like they should be decently effective against infantry. And then they've changed the KH-38 and the A-10. These apparently can no longer reacquire. They are fire and forget. Apparently these can no longer reacquire targets if they lose track, but they are fire and forget, which does make a degree of sense because with a semi-active guidance system, the launch platform is basically guiding the missile to the target. You're not necessarily controlling the missile yourself, you're just telling the missile where to go. For terminal guidance, it works pretty much the same way until the missile gets close enough to the target that it can acquire the target by itself. But with fire and forget, the missile's acquiring the target by itself the moment it leaves the launch platform. So if it loses the target, assuming that it doesn't still have a connection to the launch platform, and the launch platform is able to update it on where the target is, then yeah, it makes sense that the missile can no longer reacquire the target. Also, hang on. Mavericks, 22 damage, 900 millimeters pen. Where's the Su-34? 23 damage, 950 millimeters of pen. Okay. So the KH-38 has slightly more damage and slightly more pen, and and it is also moving way faster. Like, it is moving more than twice as fast as a Maverick. Okay, then. Well, I mean, I suppose that does make a degree of sense. If you look at it, it is a physically much larger missile than the Maverick is. Anyway. The quantity of decoys carried by planes is now doubled. 15 is now 30, and 20 is now 40. Alright, and if I'm not mistaken... here we go. There is an update. Every single time I there's an update every single time I get on BA Armory. So the way flares work, and flares work differently between helicopters and aircraft, which is why I'm pulling this up. Although I don't think flares have been doubled for helicopters, but I do want to just bring this up for the sake of it. So for helicopters, their effectiveness is 10%, so basically 10% extra 10% extra ECM. They are deployed every 0.6 seconds, and they cool down, and they last for 2 seconds. So what this means, basically, is that you have an extra 30% ECM for as long as you constantly deploy your flares for helicopters. So this goes from, for the basic Apache here, that would go from 15 to about 45%. Although there is some fluctuation. Actually, theoretically, it would be 40%. So from 15 to 55%. But it should fluctuate between 30 and 40. For aircraft, however, flares function a little bit differently. They offer an extra 15% ESM. They have a cooldown of 1 second, meaning that you have to wait 1 second in between their deployment, but they last for 3 seconds. So that's like an extra 45% ECM. So this 10% goes to about 55%. If you take double ECM pods, I actually think it goes to 65%. Yes, it would theoretically go to 65% ECM, which isn't bad. Although personally, I'm inclined to just take 4 Sidewinders, and that's still 50% ECM. Anyway, more countermeasures will benefit fighters more than bombers, since bombers generally go back to base immediately before running out of flares, and won't really benefit from that. So basically, what I think they mean here is that even with the lower quantity of decoys, bombers were barely running out anyways. Fighters, on the other hand, will be able to loiter for a longer time instead of being forced to go back to base because they run out of flares after a single engagement. So, for that matter, where's SOCOM? Where's the F-22? So the F-22 has a base ECM of 20. It gets an extra 45% from dumping flares. So yeah, that's 65% ECM from the flares. So yeah, that can be interesting. Where's the F-35? What's the ECM on the F-35? The ECM is also 20 on the F-35. 20 there, 20 there, 15 there, so that's like, what's that, 60? 20 there, that has nothing, that also has nothing. Then again, these are drones. I kind of wish drones had some ECM, especially since, if I'm not mistaken, the US Air Force has since messed with the MQ-9, or at least given the MQ-9 the option of taking electronic countermeasures against things like missiles. Low-altitude drones, the Cursor, the Forepost, and the RQ-7, are now considered as helicopter target types by weapons. High-altitude drone HP reduced from 15 to 12. Low-altitude drone HP reduced from 10 to 9. These drones were hardly usable because HIMAD, basically, were able to target them at rather long range before they could recon. Being helicopter target type means that they are now countered by SHORAD and weapons like machine guns and autocannons, which is more accurate with reality. I'll come back to that point. The reduction of hit points only has an impact on drone swarm tactics by letting units like Tor and Tunguska destroy drones with a single missile. It's worth noting that at 15 HP, the only SHORAD systems that can one-shot drones is the Pantsir. So this includes the Pantsir in the Panzer S1 and the Panzer SA for the in coastal, and the AIM, the AIM 120 on the SlamRam and NASAMS. Now, the only thing that can't, the only SHORAD system that doesn't, or at least the only SHORAD system that doesn't rely on manpad missiles like Stinger or Igla, that can't one-shot a high-altitude drone is, I think, the Strela 10. I'm pretty sure the Strela 10 does like 11 damage. Support Strela. There we go. Yes, it does 11 damage. Although, if I'm going to be entirely honest, if it comes down to a Strela 10 having to engage something like an MQ-9, A, where's your HIMAD? And B, the MQ-9 has probably destroyed the Strela 10 before it even gets within range anyway, because the Strela 10 has a high altitude range of 1,350 meters, whereas the MQ-9, with its fancy schmancy Hellfires, has a range of, 1,900 meters. So, you probably should have just brought an S-300 or an S-350 in general. As for low altitude drone HP, I guess. I mean, that would mean that the low altitude drones can be intercepted by everything that isn't manpad style SHORAD. But the only manpad, like, I mean, okay, they could theoretically be one-tapped by something like a Menstrel, but the only thing that's going to add to that list is the Menstrel and the Strela 10. And I say to that list, the only SHORAD system that could shoot down a low-altitude drone in one hit that could not do it before is the Unimog with the Menstrel. Also, I honestly just wish we had the version that had 2 missiles instead of just 1. But hey, that's just me. Because as it stands, it's basically just like a really, really big manpads. And to be fair, that's kind of what the Menstrel is, but honestly, I'm nitpicking at this point. However, as for the drones being made, as for them being considered helicopters, I don't know how useful that's going to be. And to be fair, I don't use these drones very much anyway. But yeah, they are countered by HIMAD, and they are countered pretty well by HIMAD, but are you really going to see anything that isn't? I don't think it's going to work too well, is what I'm trying to get at, because if they're considered helicopters, that now means that they're countered by everything from IFV autocannons to infantry weapons and all that kind of stuff. Not just manpads and SHORAD systems. And I remember specifically playing Baltisk on the PTE, where these drones were actually considered helicopters, and they're being shot down by Bradleys. And okay, yeah, that's fine. And sure, they're gonna see the Bradley before the Bradley shoots him down, but I don't know. I don't think it's really going to help them too much. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's really going to help them too much. I like them not being able to be engaged by HIMAD because they are flying much, much lower. But I still kind of wish they made their own target category just for these small UAVs. And I say small UAV specifically, not to get mixed up with small drone, because whenever anyone uses the term small drone, people automatically think of like quadcopters from Ukraine. But I digress. I kind of wish they made their own target type with these small UAVs and allowed SHORAD, manpads, and maybe a couple of other systems to engage them, like SHORAD, manpads, IFE autocannons, and maybe some RWS systems. But the reality of somebody with an M249 or a PKP shooting these drones down is kind of, it's almost fanciful. Like, is that the word? Is that the right word? Fanciful. It's almost fantasy. I mean, yeah, sure, someone with an M240 or a PKP. I said M249 earlier. I meant M240. Someone with an M240 or PKP probably could try and shoot down something like an RQ7, but you're gonna be shooting a lot of bullets. I mean, it's not impossible, but the hit rate's gonna be pretty low because you are taking a page from the World War II school of air defense of just putting as much lead in the air as you can and then hoping you're hitting the target. I mean, I know that's not how they shot things down in World War II. They actually, like, there was some pretty advanced fire control directors, particularly on warships for use against aircraft. But what I'm trying to get at is that the reality of a single infantry squad shooting a plane down is limited at best, unless they have a dedicated weapon for it, like a manpads. The KH-555 dispersion reduced from 120 meters to 100 meters, and the range has been increased from 8 kilometers to 10 kilometers. The KH-59MK and the KH-59MK2, which is referred to as the KH-69 in a game, cruise missile range has been increased from 6 kilometers to 10 kilometers, and the KH-101 and the KH-102 dispersion reduced from 100 meters to 80 meters. Cruise missiles are supposed to be used from outside the range of the AA network as a low-risk, low-reward option. These exceptions were not justified, so the values have been unified. The KH-101 are modern missiles, so buffing their accuracy is justified. Well, firstly, to touch on that last point, yeah, they are modern missiles technically, so they would be accurate. Although, seeing as we're talking about Russian accuracy, well, there is a reason, rather amusingly, why a number of Russian precision munitions, quote-unquote, still have a cluster warhead. Let's just say that the Russian idea of accuracy and the Western idea of accuracy are not exactly the same thing. Anyway, where's VDV? There's VDV. So, the KH-55, unfortunately, they do not give us they don't give us dispersion values for cruise missiles in this menu. Just like range and blast radius, which is a bit unfortunate, but eh. And then the KH-59, which isn't that on the issue? Yeah, I think it's here. KH-59MK, and it is MK and MK2, not Mark II. It's MK2. This is a cluster. I kind of wish there was just like a unitary HE version of this thing, but that's probably just me. And the MK2, and again, it is MK2 and not Mark II. The MK2, which for some reason it's referred to as MK2 in here. It's referred to as the MK2 on the patch notes, but it's called the KH-69 right here. That's not technically wrong. The KH-59 MK2 is also otherwise known as the KH-69. It's just weird that it goes by two names. You'd think they would pick one or the other. And this is basically just a KH-59 that is exclusive to the SU-57. In fact, I'm pretty sure that 10 kilometers, 8.5, 130, 400, 50, 1080. It's literally the exact same in between the KH-59 MK and the KH-59 MK2. So it's just a version of the KH-59 MK that is exclusive to the SU-57. Like, even the price is the same. I mean, the KH-59 MK2, as you can probably tell by the rather boxy structure of it, is supposed to be a stealthy cruise missile. But I don't think cruise missiles take advantage, like, I don't think they have stealth values in this game. Because if that was the case, then most cruise missiles the US use would be stealthy. Because the JASSM is stealthy. The JASSM was designed from the ground up to be a stealthy cruise missile. So. And besides, if cruise missiles did actually, if cruise missiles did have stealth values, that is something I think would be very interesting to know. And if they did have stealth values, what those stealth values were. I suppose it could offer some interesting aircraft customization because, like, for example, you could choose between either, and this is going to be a bit redundant for the B-52 here because you have the option of either ALCMs or JASSMs anyway. But I suppose that it could be interesting because you could have an option between, like, the AGM 88, the AGM 86 ALCM or the AGM 129. Which was that the ACM or Advanced Cruise Missile? Because the AGM 129 was a stealthy cruise missile that was supposed to replace the AGM 86. Of course, the AGM 129 was put in service in the late 1980s, and the Cold War was pretty much over at that point. Yeah, ACM. Yeah, it was the AGM 129 ACM or Advanced Cruise Missile. That's what it was. That's what I thought it was. It was withdrawn in service in 2012, and it was only carried on the B-52H. So, I mean, if cruise missiles were stealthy, then I suppose you could just because the ALCM hits harder than the JASSM. It's not as fast as the JASSM, but it hits harder and has a larger blast radius. So if cruise missiles were stealthy, then you could just treat the AGM 129 as like a stealthy version of the ALCM. But I digress. It was just a random thought. Let's see, what else? Okay, so they've reduced the price for a lot of cargo aircraft. The C-17 has gone down from 250 points to 175 points. The IL-76 has gone down from 250 points to 150 points, which I actually kind of like because the IL-76 and the C-17 they're not necessarily the same. Because, yes, the IL-76 has a seating capacity of 125 to the C-17's 102, but the C-17 can carry, like, 40, 45%. Actually, no. No, it's slightly over 40. It's like... It's like 52.5% more cargo. Because the IL-76 only has a cargo capacity of 48 metric tons, and the C-17 has a cargo capacity of 75 metric tons. So you can load a lot more stuff into a C-17 and airdrop it than you can into an IL-76. So the price difference there is a bit justified. I am also kind of hoping that VDV and Airborne Infantry do get access to the AN-124 and the C-5 Galaxy respectively, because both of those aircraft have very similar characteristics. They can both carry about 120 tons, and I think and I think their seating capacity is also roughly the same. So, although I wonder what the price of them would be. Maybe 225 points each. Or heck, it might actually be 250. Anyway, I digress. The MC-130H combat talent has gone down from 200 to 140. The AN-72P has gone down from 200 to 100. The Harvest Hawk has gone down from 175 to 110. The J-30 has gone down from 185 to 100, and the C-27J has gone down from 175 to 100. Now, I'd like to point out that there's a slight error in here, because the Harvest Hawk is not 110, it's only 100. The C-130J-30 is the one that's 110. If you go over here, you'll note that this is 100 and this is 110. I think someone, the person who was typing it out, just got the figures mixed up. With the reinforced presence of fighters and the improvement in anti-overkill logic, these planes must be made cheaper to remain viable options. Remember that you can trigger an emergency airdrop by pressing the airdrop command twice, or that you can drop units one at a time by clicking their icon on the cargo panel of the plane. Now, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I'm happy. I am very happy that they have reduced the price for transport aircraft in general, and that they've gotten the ordnance to work on the Harvest Hawk, because excuse me, one of these decks, this one specifically, the original plan that I had for this deck was I only had one C-17, but I had two Harvest Hawks that were kitted out with that were fully kitted out. And the initial plan I had was, and I don't actually think I've ever used this deck in a scenario, but the initial plan that I had was to you would use the C-17 or the Harvest Hawks or whatever to airdrop your forces. But if you needed to resupply them, because they would likely be in if not surrounded, they would probably be in contact with the enemy. You could load up an armed Harvest Hawk to airdrop supplies, reinforcements, or whatever else. And as the plane goes in and the plane comes out, it can just fire off missiles at anything that the ground units can see. That was the initial idea. However, since that didn't work, I just adjusted it to only have the two C-17s. So I'll probably have to go back and modify this one again to try and squeeze in the Harvest Hawks. One thing I will say about the prices, though, and I don't want this to sound like a complaint, because I am very, very appreciative that the prices have gone down, but I kind of wish they dropped the price for the Combat Talon a little bit further, because if you compare the Combat Talon to a basic Harvest Hawk, the stats are pretty much exactly the same, except the Combat Talon has 20% ECM, and it's also 40 points more expensive. I kind of wish they dropped the price down to like 120 points, because And okay, yeah, sure, the Harvest Hawk is 145 points when you fully kit it out, but you just fully kit it out with weapons. That's not an option that the combat talent can that that's that's an option the combat talent doesn't get, is what I'm trying to get at. So I kind of wish they dropped the price for the MC130 down to like 120 points, or maybe 125. But honestly, I'm quibbling at this point. Also, the MC130H was the second, if memory serves, of so there have technically been 5 MC130 variants. You have the MC130E, the MC130, the MC130E, the MC130H, the MC130W, which I think was reclassified as the AC130W, and because it was kind of like a modified AC130. And then you had one which I think was similar to the Harvest Hawk in that, because the Harvest Hawk is actually an aerial refueling aircraft, which is why I think it has these large tanks on the side, on the wings. That's something I don't think you get with the one in airborne infantry. No, you don't. But there was 5 of them, and I cannot remember. I think the last MC130H left service in the late 2000s. Let's see. There's 5 variants: the MC130E Combat Talon, the MC130H Combat Talon 2, the MC130P Combat Shadow, which was an aerial refueling version, the MC130W Combat Spear, the aircraft was developed to supplement the MC-130 Combat Talon and Combat Shadow forces as an interim measure after several training accidents and contingency losses supporting global war and terror. And the MC-130J. And I think the MC-130J is the latest version that fits it fits the same role as the MC-130H. So I'm kind of confused that they even included the MC-130H, because I'm pretty sure the MC-130H left service in the late 2000s or late 2010s. Let's see. The MC-130H was replaced by the MC-130J, Lieutenant General, Commander of Air Force Special Operations Command, former commander of the 15th SOS, and MC-130H pilot was on board the aircraft. That doesn't give me a date. Oh, here we go. On April 2nd, 2023. Oh, okay. The U.S. Air Force retired the last MC-130H, tail number 89-0280. Alright, so that was only 2023. Alright, that's actually a lot more recent than I thought. The other thing I'd have a small issue, for lack of a better term, with regarding the new aircraft prices has to do between the Harvest Hawk and the C-27J. And I say that specifically because, again, they're the same price, but the C-27 is almost half the capability of a Harvest Hawk. The hit points aside, the cargo capacity is literally half the Harvest Hawk. The seating capacity is only like roughly 60% of a Harvest Hawk, and it's more maneuverable, I'll give it that, and it does have some ECM, but it's the same price as a Harvest Hawk. I kind of wish they dropped these price for the C-27J down to maybe 80 points or 90 points. And with the new Russian specialization coming at some point, I wouldn't at all be surprised to see the AN-26, I believe it is, enter service, or I say enter service. I wouldn't be surprised to see the AN-26 in that specialization. And I specify the AN-26 specifically because if I am not mistaken, I think the AN-26 is the variant used by Russian Special Forces. And I think, and this is an emphasis on think, they use it in a manner roughly similar to, well, not exactly the same as the way the U.S. uses the MC-130, but it is a transport aircraft used by Russian Special Forces and apparently the Russian border guards, as I just looked it up. But the AN-26 has roughly the same capabilities as the C-27J, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it would be nice to, when that enters the game, if that was also the same price as the C-27J. So if this goes down to like 90 points or 80 points, I would expect that to go down to about 90 points or 80 points as well. Actually, what's the specifications? Okay, so 14 passengers, or so 40 passengers. The C-27 can carry 46 here. The cargo capacity is only listed at 5,500 kilograms, so I honestly wouldn't mind seeing the developers fudge that for the sake of usability, because, let's be honest, 5,500 kilograms is only enough to drop infantry, not any kind of vehicle. Maybe a buggy. That's about it. Okay. Also, there was another thing I was going to bring up. I don't suppose it was important. MiG-29K can now carry up to 4 KH-31P anti-radiation missiles. Okay, so that's 2 Russian aircraft that can carry 4 anti-radiation missiles. The MiG-35 in VDV, I believe, could also carry 4 of them. Oh yes, I remember what I was going to bring up. No, that's motorized. Where's coastal? There's coastal. The AN-72P. If I was talking about using the Harvest Hawk as a ground attack platform, or at least giving it the ability to attack ground targets. So while you were doing your resupplies and stuff, you can give it weapons so that while you're doing your resupplies, it can fire off missiles at whatever you already have spotted. You can do the same thing, at least in theory, with the gun pod and the rocket pods on the AN-72P, which I think would be kind of interesting. Fix the F-22 not being able to fire more than one AIM-260 at a time. The Predator drone Hellfire missile aim time has been fixed from 2 to 3 seconds and is now 1 second like other drones. The Griffin missile damage has been increased from 11 to 14 based on its caliber, and the Slam Ram and the NASAMS radar activation and missile shooting require the vehicle to be static. Which is interesting because prior to this, the the Sidewinders on the Slam Ram could apparently be fired on the move, or at least that's what the UI was saying. I'm not sure if that's actually accurate, but that's what the UI said. One thing I will note, however, is that while Griffin missiles on the Griffin on... Hang on. There it is. Oh, Grey Eagle. While the Griffins on the various drones... The Griffins on the drones... Words. One thing that I noticed is that while the Griffins on the drones say they do 14 damage... The ones on the AC-130... here we go. The ones on the AC-130 and the ones on the KC-130 are only listed at doing 11 still. I'm not sure if this is intended or not, but that's what it says here. So, it's just something to keep in mind. And it's also worth noting, although they have since fixed this, that for some reason this change didn't take, and it was still 2 or 3 seconds, but they have actually since fixed that. Anyway, ground combat objectives: increase the damage of tank guns, reduce the frequency of artillery, enable the micromanagement of infantry, and reinforces synergy between infantry and armored transports. So for infantry, all infantry medium machine guns now be used on the move. So this includes the M240, the PKP, and everything in that same bracket. Developer note: this was imposing the use of an attack order instead of a simple right-click when moving these infantry squads. Removing this extra micromanagement burden will make infantry armed with medium machine guns less demanding. Note that this weapon is not really fired on the move. The squad member stops to shoot and then sprints to catch up with the rest of the squad. That is generally how things work, at least from my understanding. Damage reduction offered by stress has been lowered. The rate of fire penalty received by stress increased for rifles, machine guns, and marksman rifles. And assault rifles generate less stress. They maintain enemy stress, but don't generate much unless they kill an enemy soldier. While infantry is under fire, they start crawling, looking for cover, which reduces their rate of fire, but also increases their protection. However, the bonus of protection outmatches the penalty of rate of fire, resulting in stressed squads having an overall advantage over fresh squads. This won't be the case anymore. Now, one annoying thing that I have, or one minor annoyance that I have here, is that they refer to, is that in the second one, they refer to rifles just as rifles, machine guns, and marksman's rifles. Although I note that the rate of fire penalty does not include shotguns, which is interesting. Also, it shouldn't theoretically include sniper rifles either, because then it's not listed here. But they just say rifles here, but they say assault rifles here, and I kind of wish they were a bit more specific as to whether or not they're talking about two separate things, or if they're both talking about assault rifles. Because if I go over to an infantry unit, like, where's Airborne? There's Airborne. If I go over to Airborne, their rifles are listed as assault rifles. And I can't find anything here that isn't listed as an assault rifle. Including, and I find this kind of interesting, the G36s used in the reservists here. Because, or I say G36s, the G3s. Because the G3 was not an assault rifle. It was a battle rifle. Because there is a distinction between an assault rifle and a battle rifle. And I'm using the term assault rifle, not assault weapon. That's a politicized thing. An assault rifle is basically, it's a literal translation of the German Sturmgewehr. And everyone probably knows the term Sturmgewehr from the STG-44, which has generally been called the first assault rifle. Now, I don't know of anything I don't know of anything that can contest that claim, although I will point out that the German FG-42, which was a rifle intended for use by German airborne forces, could arguably be considered the first assault rifle, but I digress. And assault rifles do not shoot, most assault rifles will shoot what's known as an intermediate caliber cartridge. Battle rifles will shoot a rifle caliber cartridge. I'd like to point out that these G3s, they are shooting 7.62 by 51 NATO. That's the same cartridge as, if I can, yeah, let's grab this. That's the same cartridge as the medium machine guns like the M240 shoot. And 7.62, or I say 7.62, 7.662 by 51 NATO, or its Russian counterparts 7.62 by 54R, these are rifle cartridges. Like they were intended, particularly in the case of the 7.62 by 54R, to be used from bolt-action rifles, or at least that's the weapons they were first used with. 7.62 by 51 NATO is a bit newer. It was derived from the 30-06 cartridge, which is just, I mean, like the 51 and 7.62 by 51 refers to the bullet length. It's 2 inches long, or 51 millimeters. 30-06 is 2.5 inches long, or 63 millimeters. If you were to NATO type classify 30-06, it would be 7.62 by 63. And those were rifle cartridges. Those were intended to be used from rifles. An assault rifle shoots an intermediate cartridge, so something like 7.62 by 39 for the AK-47, 5.56 by 45 for the M4. The STG-44 shot 7.992 by 33 Kurtz. It's kind of like a rifle cartridge, but it's made smaller, or at the very least the bullet has been made shorter. So, and the weapon, as the name implies, assault rifle, it is intended as a rifle to be used in assaults, in relatively short range shooting. So, I don't know, I wish they were a little bit more specific with the naming, but anyway, I digress. 50% of the stress taken by transport is transferred to the infantry inside. When a transport is destroyed, the surviving infantry exit the wreck. When a transport is destroyed, the surviving infantry exiting the wreck is fully panicked. In combination with the changes to stress modifiers above, this will make sacrifice of transports and assault less efficient. Losing the transport, then sprinting forward with the panicked infantry results in much more damage taken than before. I have seen some people complaining that infantry that was in a transport that gets ambushed should either be killed outright or should be super panicked so that the ambushing team can basically slaughter them. At least that's the gist of what I've seen some people complaining on the Discord. I would like to know just exactly how the game is supposed to tell that, oh, this transport is being ambushed, but that's beside the point. The crux of the complaint, however, seemed to be that when you destroy a transport, the infantry inside scatters out and then basically stomps the ambushing team. The thing is okay, I understand your complaint, but that doesn't mean that the ambushing team should necessarily stomp the infantry either. And besides, you're conducting an ambush. When you go loud, you're probably going to want to move, reconceal, and then reset up somewhere else. Instead of, staying where you are, because you're probably going to receive some retaliation soon. Infantry resupply ability added to armored troop transports. That is specifically troop transports that you have to bring in with your infantry, not supply vehicles. Infantry receive ammunition and healing at a slow rate when they stay within range of the vehicle. The vehicle must be immobile. Units stressed or in combat cannot resupply. The rearming speed is twice slower compared to supply crates. The healing speed is 3 times slower. Now, apparently this is infinite. But I'll get on to that in just a second. The M985 battleship and the M-ATV also get this ability, even though they are not transports. The ability also works when infantry is transported inside the vehicle. This will reward players keeping their transports with their infantry instead of sacrificing them or refunding them instantly. Now, apparently this resupply ability is infinite, which I have seen create a lot of contention in the player base, and a lot of, well, a lot of... I've seen some people saying some comments that I don't particularly agree with. But I'm not going to touch on that here. If I'm going to be entirely honest, I don't particularly care for this change specifically, and to be even more specific, I don't care for the fact that it's infinite. I like the idea that transports can resupply infantry. That was tested in PTE, and it seemed to work pretty well. The problem that I have is that it is infinite. I mean, heck, I like the fact that they've given it an actual AOE rather than the infantry needing to be inside the transport for it to actually work. I like that they've given it an AOE, but I don't like that it's infinite, because it removes like 75% of the reason why you would even bring in supplies in the first place. And I don't really think that is a good change. Now, I like the idea that the battleship and the MATV have it, even though they're not infantry transports. And this kind of ties into the idea of the ability of having an AOE, because you can bring in infantry alongside something like a battleship. Maybe bring in something like, say, a couple of strikers with troopers and a battleship. And then you can use the battleship to support your infantry alongside the strikers. And you can resupply your infantry from there. I just do not like that it is infinite. And if I'm going to be entirely honest, most of the reason why I delayed making this video a week was because I honestly expected them to release either a hotfix adjusting that, or release a post addressing the not outrage, but addressing the whole infinite resupply thing, which they have not done at time of recording, which is a little surprising, if I'm going to be entirely honest, but I don't know. Still, this isn't something that I personally care for. Healing cost for infantry had from 20 kilograms to 10 kilograms supplies per HP, so 50 kilograms per soldier instead of 100. Ammo must still be replenished after the soldier appears. Infantry can be resupplied without unloading from their transport. When the resupply order is given to a transport, it waits for the infantry inside to be fully healed before the order is considered validated. It is not possible to validate a fast move or reverse order on a supply crate to give a resupply order. It is not possible to queue load orders even when the transport is full. It allows queuing multiple load and unload orders. So if you have a transport with infantry in it, you can queue orders so that it unloads the infantry into one building and then picks up some more infantry and goes somewhere else. Is basically what this means if I'm reading it right. These changes will reduce the cost, but also divide by 2 the amount of micromanagement required to resupply infantry and send them back to the fight. You can now put your infantry in a transport, order a fast move on the crate, and then queue the order to come back to the front. Previously, you needed to dismount next to the crate, wait, click on the crate with the infantry, queue the order to mount in the vehicle, wait, and then give the order to come back to the front. Infantry equipped with man pads, though, altitude optics has been increased from 1,600 meters to 2,500 meters. Ground optics increased from 1,200 to 1,400 meters for infantry equipped with anti-infantry weapons with a range superior or equal to 800 meters, and anti-tank capabilities with a range superior or equal to 1,200 meters. Now, the anti-tank one is fairly straightforward, but okay, here's my calculator. The anti-infantry one is, where is standard? There we go. Is you have to take into account the infantry stealth value, because with a vision range of 1,200, divide that by 1.75, you're not seeing another infantry squad until they're 686 meters away, rounding up. However, Now that's not a problem for most squads because generally their maximum weapon range is 600 meters if they have something like a DMR or a medium machine gun. But if you're talking about something like a grenade launcher team or an M2 Browning team that have guns that can fire out to 800 meters, like the grenade launcher and the M2 Browning, a vision range of 1400 meters divided by 1.75 is going to get you 800 meters, the range of the M2 Browning or the Mark 19. This will make the use of ATGM infantry and manpads easier as they can more autonomously track their targets. And then they made some changes here. Semi-active infantry ATGM aim time reduced by 1 second from 3 to 4 to 2 to 3. This is a buff to things like tow teams, but this is really going to help Russian infantry a lot because every man-portable ATGM they have is semi-active. In fact, every single ATGM Russia has is semi-active, with the sole exception of the Lemur is terminal guidance, and I think the Hermes is also terminal guidance. But those are on helicopters. The SRA rocket launcher aim time has been reduced. The SPG-9 aim time has been reduced. The SPG-9 range has been increased to 1,000 meters, which is funny because I always thought it was 1,000. I honestly do not know, but I always thought it was 1,000 meters. The Cat Javelin, the number of javelins they carry has been increased to 6. The Assaultmen Small have the number of anti-tank and thermal rockets reduced from 8 to 6 of each. The Assaultman Small price has been increased to 80. The Assaultman SRA price has been reduced to 80, which is nice because I really like the SRA. I would still like them to give us the anti-armor version of the SRA. I know that the SRAs that are currently actually is the SRA still in service? Because the SRA originally came SRAW SRAW literally stands for short range assault weapon. And they originally came in 2 versions, if I'm not mistaken. They came in basically a dual purpose / blast fragmentation version, which is the one in game. And then they came in a top attack anti-armor version, which I think is technically an overfly top attack, much like the TOW is, rather than a true quote-unquote top attack like the Javelin, where the missile actually comes down and physically hits the top of the vehicle. The way overfly top attack works is that the missile flies over the top of the vehicle, but it has a couple of shaped charges at the bottom of the missile, for lack of a better term, that are pointed down that fire as the missile flies over the target. So I would honestly really like if, say, for an extra 20 or 30 points, they gave us the top attack version of the SRA, and as like a third upgrade for an extra 20 or 25 or an extra 20 or 30 points. And heck, you don't even need to up the pen on it, and it's still going to kill pretty much every tank in the game in 3 hits. No, or even the toughest tank in the game in 3 hits, not counting APS. So I think that could be interesting as to give Marine Corps another anti-armor option. Although if you did up the pen from, say, 140 to like 250, I suppose that could also be interesting. But you don't even need to do that. It's still gonna kill things up to and including a T-14 in 3 hits. Actually, no, it's not. What's the damage on the SRA? It might not even be 3 hits. It might only be 2. Look at that. There it is. SRA. What's the damage on the SRA? 14. Yeah, that's going to be killing a T-14 in... Actually, no. I think that would be killing a T-14 in 3 hits. But even if they just treat it like a TOW 2B, 12 damage, 250 pen, you're going to be killing pretty much anything in 2 hits, I think. Either 2 or 3, I'm not actually sure. Anyway. Up way too far. VDV England now carrying extra missiles, so the number of missiles has gone up from 3 to 4, and they've also slightly increased the price. Honestly, I don't think I would have worried about the price increase, but that's just me. The RPG-29, the RPG-7V2, the one the Sturmoviki have, or the one that the Guards Sturmoviki have that fire thermobaric rockets, and the small reload time has now been slightly reduced. The Guards Sturmoviki CQC variant has had an AK-74M rifle replaced by an automatic shotgun, making them more efficient than CQC. I have seen some people complaining that when they took the Guards Sturmoviki away from guards and actually put them in mech, they had to reduce the squad size from 8 to 7 so they could fit in the transports that mech has. And apparently the guy that they removed had a shotgun, so instead of having 4 shotguns and 4 rifles, they now only have 3 shotguns and 4 rifles. I have seen some people complaining that they aren't as effective anymore. I still think that change would have been fixed by either A, giving them back to guards and just swapping Sturmoviki back to where they were, the original Sturmoviki, that is, or just unifying Russian squad sizes and vehicle seats. Honestly, I think I'd do both. Naval Resvedka weapon swap one soldier from an RPK-74M to an AK-103 plus RPG-27. That drops the number of RPK-74s they have down to 1, if I am not mistaken. Motorized, coastal, yes. Drops the number of RPK-74s down to 1, but they do get an extra RPG-27. It is suppressed, though. Also, I do kind of like that there is an RPG, an RPK on the unit icon. The SSO, the GP-34 grenade launchers have been replaced by automatic shotguns, and the price has been increased from 85 to 90 points. So that should make them more effective at room clearing. Although they are technically line infantry, so they don't have the same stealth as recon infantry. But I guess that could make them more effective with force as well. The SSO standoff armor value has been reduced from 10 to 8, and they describe that as fixed. And I find this interesting because the SSO is one of 5 special forces, quote. Well, I say special forces in quotes because I'm not sure if the Cherry Berries will qualify as special forces that have that are in the infantry tab, and for some reason with the U.S. the standoff configuration has 8 armor, but the CQC configuration has 10. Now, that's not particularly unusual. I mean, most are kitted out like that. Things like Rangers are kitted out like that. Even though Rangers are line infantry, Rangers RRC is kitted out the same way. Most of these elite squads have that, is what I'm trying to get at. In fact, I think these guys have it as well. No, they don't. They have 10 armor all around. Which is interesting because it applies to the scouts, the SUV, which are kitted out for room clearing, have 10 armor. The other scout teams only have 8. But for some reason, the Russians, and I guess the Baltic Special Forces, didn't do that. They would have 10 armor in both their CQC and their standoff configurations. Now SSO, that's not true for SSO. However, it is still true for the Cherry Berries. And here is something that they do not mention anywhere in the patch. they have changed the Cherryberry standoff configuration by quite a lot. Actually, they've removed the automatic grenade launcher and they've given them an RPG-29, which seems to be roughly equivalent to the Mark IV Carl Gustav, in that it's basically a reloadable. Well, the Mark IV Carl. Well, the RPG-29 is basically just a reloadable RPG-27, and the stats for the RPG-29 are similar to the Mark IV Carl Gustav, is what I'm trying to get at. But you'll note that these guys have 10 armor in either configuration, which is kind of interesting. Also, this new configuration is not mentioned anywhere else. Is not mentioned anywhere in the PTE, for that matter. Or not PTE, the update. Another thing I noticed that isn't mentioned anywhere in the update is that the price for Ranger Moz is now 25 points instead of 30. So the total price is now 95 points instead of 100. And while I'm here, I might as well mention that that the price of the Silent Hawk, which was 80 before, is now 100. None of these changes is mentioned in the update. So, I don't know. I don't even know if they're intended or not. But I digress. Infantry specifically. Yeah, let's just settle on these ones. And next we have a new customization for VDV. VDV Sturm, a variant of the VDV Dish with an RPG-7 that shoots thermobaric rockets. Okay, so where's VDV? VDV Dish. And so they now have this. So it ups their armor to 10, and it gives them a version that shoots thermobaric rockets, much like Sturmoviki. Although Sturmoviki doesn't actually get one that shoots thermobaric rockets, it's just an HE, and they only have 8 armor. So I guess that's more akin to things like guards at Sturmoviki. Which makes sense, I guess. Anyway. Here we go. The M250, which for some reason is described as a medium machine gun, even though it's described as a light machine gun in game, if I'm not mistaken. And it's intended to be a light machine gun in reality. Ability to fire at enemies located inside the same building has been removed. Ranger Sniper's AT has gone down from 120 to 110, which is nice. The Green Berets have just generally had their prices slashed across all 3 options, which again is nice. The Spetsnaz VMF has had its price slashed, particularly for the sniper option, which again is nice. And the Spetsnaz GRU has had the prices slashed for the mixed loadout and the AT loadout. The KAC AMG, the M4, the Mark 48, the Mini-Me, and the PKP Bullpup has also had their aim time fixed to match other medium machine guns. Now, here's a couple of things. The Spetsnaz GRU, it does not specify, and I really wish they would, whether or not the verbal loadout was supposed to stay at 130. Because it just says that the mixed loadout has had its price slashed, and the RPG-28 loadout has had its price slashed. It says nothing about the verbal loadout. So I don't know if this is supposed to stay at 130, or if this was also supposed to have the price match the RPG or the mixed loadout either. So. Also, where's Airborne? Because I'm pretty sure... Yeah, it's listed as a light machine gun in game. And it's basically supposed to... It's supposed to be a replacement for both the M240 and the M249. The M240 being a medium machine gun and the M249 being a light machine gun. It's supposed to fit in that same light machine gun role, but do... Basically, it's supposed to be able to do the job of both. It's supposed to be a light machine gun that can be used like a light machine gun, but has the capability of a medium machine gun. I'm not don't understand why they removed that ability, or the ability for it to fire at enemy units in the same building. Although it does have a long range, I will say that. I mean, like, airborne in general has a long range, so. Helicopters. When a helicopter is flying low is destroyed, the soldiers it carries have a 50% probability to survive. This probability is reduced depending on the helicopter's max HP and weapon damage. I'm guessing that if the helicopter has low HP and it gets hit by a high damage attack, that's going to reduce the percentage of survival, or the percent probability of survival. The low altitude icon appears on helicopter labels, indicate that altitude is low enough for infantry to have a probability to survive a crash. Excuse me, it's dusty in here. Currently, transport helicopters are rarely used past the initial deployment because it is too dangerous to bring infantry close to the front line, and it's faster to use a truck than dropping infantry far back and then having them walk the rest of the distance. Rather than reducing helicopters' price, which could lead to problems of an empty helicopter rush, it is a better approach to limit the cost of a crash by letting the infantry survive even if they're in bad shape. I honestly don't know what helicopter rush they're talking about, because I cannot think of any helicopter that is both A, heavily armed enough for me to want to use it as a weapon in its own right, and B, cheap enough already that I wouldn't want to, or that I would be okay with losing it. I guess there's some in VDV that might qualify, but I don't know. Because everything else is just too expensive. That said, I do like the idea that I do like the price reductions that helicopters had from PTE. I think that made helicopters excuse me, maybe not better, but it made them a bit more convenient, especially the transport helicopters. The AH-6 and the MH-6 armor has been reduced from 10 to 0, so they are now one-shot by weapons that do 8 damage or more. The AH-6 Hellfire upgrade price has been slightly reduced from 30 points to 25 points, and the AH-6 Stinger upgrade price has been slightly increased from 20 to 25 points. The AH-6 equipped with Stingers is too cost-efficient and prevents the Russians from attempting any move with helicopters on the flanks. While it is part of the asymmetric design to give the US, and especially SOCOM, an advantage in this domain, we don't want to make it too significant. It's not a problem when playing US Mirror because the AH-1 equipped with the AIM-9 counters the AH-6 very effectively. With this change, Russia gained several hard counters to the AH-6 in the form of the Mi-24P equipped with R-60s, a very cheap planes equipped with multiple R-60s, like the Issue-25 and the Yak-38, and the Verba Manpad. Now, I'd like to point out that there are many more counters to the AH-6 than just an AH-1 equipped with the AIM-9. The AH-1 equipped with the AIM-9 only appears in one specialization. Anything that does 8 damage is going to counter an AH-6 now, it seems, which includes Stinger Manpads, or things like the air-to-air Stingers that other helicopters get. So, again, anything that does 8 damage. Helicopter non-top attack ATGM's aim time reduced by 1 second. Again, as with the infantry, this is a massive buff to Russian helicopters in particular, because the only top attack ATGMs they have is the Hermes and the Lemire. And the Comanche Hellfire aim time has been fixed from 3 to 4 seconds to 2 to 3 seconds, like other helicopters equipped with top attacking missiles. And oh, good. Why do you do that? What I want is Helicopters. Russian. These are terminal guidance. Okay, are these terminal guidance as well? I think they are. Yes, they are. Okay. That's what I want to know. Vehicles. Vehicle reaching yellow stress, so stressed, will get a smaller aim time penalty from plus 50 to plus 25%. Vehicles reaching red stress, so panicked, will have a smaller aim time penalty from plus 100 to plus 50%. Banded vehicles like tanks could feel very sluggish with an aim time of up to 8 seconds. Previously, these modifiers were shared between every unit type. We can now define independent modifiers for vehicles, infantry, and planes, allowing us to assign more adapted values for each unit type. So it sounds like they've done a lot of work behind the scenes to allow them to adjust different values for units or unit types individually rather than as a whole, because this is the second time that they mentioned different stress values for different unit types rather than a single stress value across all units. Tank guns damage have been increased. The 120 and 125 millimeter saber rounds increased from 6 to 8 damage. 120, 122, so the 2S1, and 125 millimeter heat rounds increased from 9 to 10 damage. 125 millimeter HE rounds increased from 12 to 13. 105 millimeter saber rounds increased from 5.5 to 7, and 100 millimeters AP rounds. So the Sable on the BMO or on the Rapara, on the BMOP, damage increased from 5 to 6. Gun launch ATGM damage increased to match the new heat round damage. This is a very important change, allowing tanks with 120 to 125 millimeter guns to destroy any armored vehicle in 2 shots, regardless of their heat protection. It's worth noting that this does not count tanks. It also increases the lethality of tank versus tank engagements by 33%. Now, where's my calculator? So, the previous value that they were using was with a damage value of 6, made me believe that the modifier that they were using, and I say modifier, I don't know if they're using a caliber, I don't know if they're basing tank gun damage based on caliber. But I think they might be. And I emphasize the word think here because prior to the PTE, when tank guns only did 6 damage, everything pretty much had a modifier of 20, or at least you could divide everything by 20. 120 millimeter tank guns, you divide that by 20, and it's 6. It's not quite 6 if you divide a 125 millimeter tank gun by 20, but I assume they were just rounding. The 105s worked pretty much the same way. The 100 millimeter gun on the Rapara was you divide that by 20 and it's 5. Well, when I made my video talking about the PTE changes, I noticed that they were following the exact same curve. And I think they're following the exact same curve here as well. Because, however, now they were following the exact same curve in the PTE, but I think that I think it was a by 12 divider instead of by 20. I think here they're using a by 15 because 120 divided by 15 will give us 8. 125 divided by 15 will give us 8.33, so round it down to 8. 105 divided by 15 will give us 7. Okay, so I can't clear that. 100 divided by 15 will give us 6.5. So I guess they just rounded that down to 6. However, the interesting thing here is, what if you want to add different gun calibers? And this is I made this the same I made the same series of calculations I'm about to make in my video talking about the PTE changes. Because when you think about, there's a lot of different gun calibers. Like the T-62, which is apparently coming with the new Russian specialization, has a 115 millimeter gun. You also have things like the 90 millimeter Cockerel gun used on a lot of Cold War era armored vehicles. You've got things like the 75 millimeter gun used on the Scorpion light tank. I think it was technically a light tank. I think that's what it was classified as. Basically, it's a scimitar, but instead of having the 30 millimeter Rardin, it has a relatively short barrel, low velocity 75 millimeter gun. And then you also have bigger guns, like for example the Rheinmetall RH-130 that the Germans are currently toying with. You have 140 millimeter guns that the U.S. and the Germans, and I believe the Swedes, were toying with during the Cold War. And if you believe the Russian propaganda, apparently the T-14 is supposed to be able to mount a 152 millimeter gun. So if they're using a divisor, or if their damage curve is reliant, or at least influenced by a divide by 15 multiplier, then what's the damage for that going to look like? So that's what we're going to check. Now, if you divide 90 by 15, you're going to get... Hang on. I messed up. If you divide 90 by 15, you are going to get 6. If you divide 75 by 15, you're going to get 5. If you divide like 115, like the 150 millimeter gun on the T-62, divide that by 15, you get 7.5. Or the 130 millimeter gun, like the RH-130, you divide that by 15, and it goes to 8.6. Maybe round that down to 8.5 for balance. You take the 140 millimeter guns that I mentioned, and you divide that by 15, and you get 9 damage. And you take the 152 millimeter gun, and to be fair to the Russians here, at the same time that the US, the Germans, and these Swedes were toying with 140 millimeter guns, the Soviets were also toying with the idea of mounting 152 millimeter guns in their tanks at that point. Now, honestly, I genuinely believe that the T-15 will never receive 152 millimeter gun. Or not T-15, the T-14 will never receive 152 millimeter gun. But because of the Soviet experiments during the late Cold War, I'm willing to at least entertain the idea of 152 millimeter tank gun. And that gives us a damage value of 10. So I think if they do add different tank gun calibers, it could be interesting to see what damage values they have based on that curve. And then they've nerfed the Booker. Now let's be honest here. As much as this is going to sting to say, the Booker kind of needed it. Okay? So, yeah. I like the Booker. I think the Booker was fun, but I think we can all agree the Booker needed it needed a bit of a nerf. So the Heat frontal armor has been reduced from 800 to 500. The base price has been reduced from 145 to 40. The APS upgrade has been increased from 45 to 50. The 105mm gun option has been reduced from 10 points to 0. Excuse me. The 50mm gun option has been increased from 0 to 10 points. The Booker with the 50mm gun is by far the most overused and overperforming unit in the game. It will be strongly impacted by the increased damage of tank guns, which will kill it in 2 shots instead of 3. The Heat armor was also over-evaluated compared to what a vehicle of this volume and weight could realistically have, so it has been reduced, making infantry RPGs more of a threat. Now, I will agree that Booker needed a nerf, but I will contest this last sentence, and I'll contest it for two reasons. Firstly, the Booker has the engine in the front of the vehicle, and generally, the fuel tanks. What I'm trying to say is the Booker has the engine in the front, and if I'm not mistaken, the fuel tanks are also in the front. And fuel tanks, as dumb as this may sound, fuel tanks are actually used to offer some protection, or are often positioned to act like vehicle armor. And secondly, to be a bit blunt, you don't know the kind of composites that was used in the front of that vehicle. The only way anyone would know that is if they were A, part of the development team that actually developed the vehicle, or part of the company that produced it, or B, they somehow got their hands on that information, and in that case, the FBI is probably going to blow their door off their hinges very soon. So, I'm going to be entirely honest. I think the Booker needed the nerf, but I think they went too far with the frontal heat armor. Because the armor on the Booker, because now the Booker is basically just a M60 that is 20 points more expensive for slightly better forward speed and slightly better optics. And I don't know. I don't think it was necessary. Now, one thing I kind of wish they would do is, instead of upping the frontal armor, which honestly I think they should either just up the frontal armor or give the Booker an armor package. But one thing that they could do, if they did want to give the Booker an armor package, is give it an armor package, like 2 armor packages. One that adds armor to the sides, and maybe nothing up front, or maybe a little bit of armor up front, like it increases the frontal armor from 500 to maybe 700. Or the frontal heat armor, rather. And it increases its hit points by 1. For maybe 10 points. And then for 20 points, you could add a bit extra side armor, going up maybe to 500, similar to like a Tusk kit. Actually, that's a point. What is the side armor value here? 400, 500. Yeah, so like the first package starts at 400, and the second goes to 500 for the side armor. And then the front armor goes to maybe something like 900 for an extra 20 points. But you could also increase the frontal kinetic armor, because at 300 kinetic protection, every single gun is going to cut through that, even at maximum range. Because even 105s, or heck, even the 100mm gun on the Rapara has a minimum penetration of 325mm, meaning that at maximum range, it's still going to cut right through that. Which is why, if they do give it an armor package, and honestly, I wouldn't even mind seeing the armor package prices instead of 10 and 20 points being 15 and 30. Is it would increase the front armor from 300 to maybe like 350, which means that all 100 and 105mm guns would be able to punch through it. And I think that would be the same penetration value. Okay, so the 125mm, the Mango round wouldn't be able to punch through it cleanly at maximum range. But even then, they wouldn't be able to punch through it at maximum range. But that just means they wouldn't be doing full damage. They'd still be doing close to full damage. I think the only round that wouldn't be doing full damage... Here we go. It's the Vent that has 350mm of kinetic pen, which matches that. So the first armor package upping the vehicle's frontal armor to 350 would mean that all 100 or 105 millimeter AP rounds and the Mango round on the really bad Russian tanks wouldn't be able to do full damage from the front at maximum range. It'd be doing close, but not quite. And then the second package could up the frontal armor to maybe 400, which would stop the 375 damage, the 375 pen from... I thought one of these, and I think it's on the T80, has 375. Is it on the T80? No, that's the B3. I need the B1. Here we go. It's the BA. Has 375. Alternatively, they could it could increase the kinetic armor to 375 for the first armor package and 450 for the second. That would make the vehicle more resistant to the 100/105 millimeter guns and the really crappy, crappy tank ammunition. But it still wouldn't affect the. It still wouldn't affect it that much. Yeah, I mean, you're not going to be able to face tank fire, and it would offer a bit. Primarily, it would offer extra protection from the 100 and 105 millimeter guns. Is what I'm trying to get at. But it wouldn't affect tanks too much. The BMPT base price reduced by 15 points. The armor grenade launcher upgrades each reduced by 5 points. So the total price has just gone down from 250 to 225. And they actually buffed the T15. The 57mm upgrade price has been reduced from 100 points to 75 points. Similarly to the Booker, the increased tank damage impacts the efficiency of these heavily armored autocannon carriers, as they cannot so recklessly try and circle around tanks anymore. And then they've also made some changes to vehicles. Semi-active gun launch ATGM aim time reduced from 3 to 4 seconds to 2 to 3. So that's... Hang on. I'm curious. Tank aim time is 3 to 4. Does that mean that these will aim faster than a normal tank, a normal tank round? I don't know. The RPO A rockets and the BTO aim time reduced. The Fletcher rounds, the Warpig aim time reduced. The SBG-9 and the PV 1110 aim time reduced. The availability of the T-72B3 has been increased from 3 to 6, and the availability of the T-72B or the T-72B has been increased from 6 to 9. Now, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I thought they were just going to increase them to 4 and 8 respectively, but I actually like the way they've done this because a Soviet and later Russian tank platoon is 3 vehicles, and these are all dividable by 3. So if I want to bring two tank platoons of T-72B3s, I can. If I want to bring 2 tank platoons or 3 tank platoons of T-72Bs, I can. So I like this change that I don't like, and I'm going to explain why. The T-14 Armata reload time has been reduced from 6 to 7 seconds to 5 to 6 seconds. Now I want to explain why, and the reason is I remember reading on a post on the Patreon from a while ago that the whole concept behind auto-loading vehicles is that the reload time of an auto-loading vehicle is less than their manually loaded counterparts, but because it's an autoloader and thus a machine, the reload time is not affected by vehicle stress. The problem that I have with the change they made to the T-14 is now the autoloader on the T-14 isn't affected by stress, and it now reloads faster than a manually loaded tank gun. That's the problem that I have. So it goes against what they were talking about. Now, some people might try and point out that the M8 with the 120 also has a 5 to 6 second reload time. The same as on the T-15. And okay, yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing that reload time go up to like 7 or 8. Because if I'm going to be entirely honest, like, even outside the context of the changes that they made to the T-14, I was genuinely surprised when I saw how fast this gun reloads. Like, firstly, it reloads... It's the same reload speed as the 105. And... the 120mm shells are a lot larger than the ones in the 105. And... honestly, for as cheap as the vehicle is, I think the reload time might be a little too fast. I don't know. I personally would prefer if the reload time was maybe like 7 or 8 seconds. And I prefer that, like, because even before this change, the T-14's reload time was the same as on a manually loaded tank gun. So I kind of wish they would revert the change on the T-14, and before anyone starts whining about the Thunderbolt, up this to 7 or 8 seconds, like on the T-90s. The Grom gun on the BMP-1 has its range increased to 1,000 meters. I don't have a problem with that, but I still wish that the 2A28 Grom could not be fired on the move. The gun was not stabilized in reality, meaning that while yes, you could theoretically fire it on the move, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn from the inside. So I kind of wish they removed the ability of the gun to be fired on the move. But again, that's just me. The ACV infantry seats has been increased to 14, so this lets Marine Raiders or 6+8 manpower squads combo fit inside. I am so happy that they have made this change. The Warpig Fletcher upgrade has been reduced to 10 points, and the Warpig TOW 2B upgrade has also been reduced to 10 points. I mean, cool, but I'm still kind of questioning why the Fletcher's on the Warpig. But that's just me. The anti-aircraft shell on the Bereg, the dispersion has been reduced by quite a lot, in fact. Artillery. Howitzers, the MLRS, and the ballistic missile resupply time has been doubled, and they take much longer to return to deck when refunds are killed. I showed that bit off. This is the most meaningful change to artillery, forcing players to move carefully. Forcing players to more carefully select their targets, as the amount of time these weapons can be fired during a match is drastically reduced, especially if they are sold after shooting. The smoke duration for mortars has been reverted back to 60 seconds. It remains 90 seconds for howitzers and the smoke rockets in the Grad. Howitzers and mortars direct fire heat rounds now have a separate aim time of 3 to 4 seconds. 152 155mm cluster rounds, the area of effect has been increased to match that of HE rounds. The Grad incendiary rockets have had their price reduced by 50 points, so now it's only 200 points. The Brutus guided round has had its price increased from by 20 points, so now the total package is 150 points instead of 130. The Smirch cluster rockets have been reduced by 25 points, now they only cost 250. The Tornado S guided cluster has had its price reduced by 25. So now it only costs 275 instead of 300. The Tornado S guided HE has had its price increased by 25 points, so now it's 300 points instead of 275. So they basically swapped the prices between the Tornado S's guided cluster and guided HE. The M270, the M270A1 specifically had its cluster rockets, the price reduced to 250. The HIMARS had its guided cluster price reduced by 20 points to 200 from 220. The HIMARS guided HE has had its price increased by 20 points from to 220 from 200. So again, they swapped the price. And the M270A2 Gimlers has had its guided cluster price reduced by 25 points and its guided HE price increased by 25 points. So again, they've swapped the prices. Oh, come on. Except they didn't. Or at least it hasn't shown up here. Now, I have already sent a bug report about this and a couple of other things. So I expect this to be changed. I think this is just an error. So I expect that to be changed at some point soon. The HE rockets benefit more from being guided than cluster, which applies the same damage over a large area, hence the inversion in price between them. Cluster ballistic missiles now fully ignore cover, which is kind of interesting. I guess it's to allow cluster ballistic missiles to be more effective against infantry and buildings, but that's about it. The Tochka U cluster missile area effect has been unified with other cluster ballistic missiles. It's now 110. Excuse me. The Iskander-K with 4 cruise missiles now rearms 25% faster than the version with 2 cruise missiles. So instead of taking 60 seconds per missile, it only takes 45 seconds per missile. The 2S7M, the extended range ammunition, has now been made laser guided, and the customization cost has been increased from 20 points to 50 points. Now, there's something I want to show off here, because I think this is hilarious. So basically, the 2S7M now gets guided rounds. Oh, and I saw one person on the Discord complaining that, oh, Russia doesn't have laser guided 203mm rounds. This is stupid. Like no, they don't. But this is a game. Calm down. And so we now have a laser guided 8-inch shell. This is like a 270-pound shell. Oh, excuse me. That you're dropping on your opponent. It is hilarious. What's even more hilarious is look at the dispersion and how the dispersion has been drastically reduced. Oh, if I'm going to be entirely honest, I wasn't confident in reducing the in the upgrade at first, because at first I figured that an extra 200-meter range and laser guidance wasn't worth 50 points. And then I noticed the massive dispersion reduction, and now it is very, very much worth 50 points, in my opinion. That's literally a 33% dispersion reduction across both axes. And the Nona SPK, or the Nona SPK, has been transferred from Coastal to Moto, which I think gives every Russian spec a mortar carrier. Yeah, it does. Oh, okay. Although to be fair, it was a little redundant for Coastal to have 2 mortar carriers. One annoying thing that I will say, though, is that they did not unify the stats between the BTR-80 chassis for the Nona SVK and the regular BTR-80. So you'll notice that the SVK is still slower, and if you put the armor package on, it gets slower still. Whereas if you put the armor package on the regular BTR-82, it doesn't affect the speed at all. So I kind of wish they adjusted that and they unified that, but that's just me. Next, we have the sneak ability. The sneak ability represents how recon vehicle crews infiltrate in reality with the engine running at low RPM to avoid creating sound and dust, and to give them more time to scan while advancing. In game, the ability doubles the stealth of the vehicles while reducing their speed by half. The ability is cancelled if the vehicle is detected or shoots. And the sneak ability has been given to 8 recon vehicles and 9 ATGM vehicles. And I'm going to cover the ATGM vehicles first. 4 of them are Russian, 4 of them are US, and then 1 of them is Baltic. And that's the G-Wagon. And I understand why they gave sneak to the ATGM carriers, but what I think is much more interesting is that they gave sneak to recon vehicles. Only 2 of the recon vehicles to receive sneak are US. The other 6 are Russian. Now, I honestly wouldn't mind seeing more US vehicles get sneak. Like, for example, the M7 B-Fist. I wouldn't mind seeing that get sneak. I wouldn't mind seeing the B-Fist get sneak. I wouldn't mind seeing... Hang on. Let me pull this up. US, go away. No one likes you. Recon. I wouldn't mind seeing the B-Fist get sneak. Even I mean, I know this does already, but I wouldn't mind seeing this get it. I wouldn't mind seeing the Humvee LRAS get it. I perfectly understand why they didn't give it to the Stryker RV. And I guess you could give it to the LAV-25 as well. That said, are there any I don't think any of the vehicles that actually have sneak can carry troops. So I guess give it to the IFAV. So the IFAV, the B-Fist, the Humvee LRS, and then maybe the MATV if you want to give it to 4 US vehicles. But I perfectly understand why they didn't give it to the Stryker RV. Aside from the fact that I don't think any of these vehicles can carry infantry. One that they did give it to is the T90M, the Resvedchik, if I pronounced that correctly. This thing is dumb. This thing is very dumb. This is the recon tank, specifically Recon T90, which I'd like to point out as another change that they didn't mention in the patch, or the patch notes. They also reduced the base price of this thing by 10 points. It used to be $290, now it's $280. But with the optical sensors, you now get sneak on a tank, an actual tank. I'd like to point out, okay, the TUA doesn't get this, but the Resvedchik does. This is stupid. This is incredibly stupid, and I love it. Because, here's the thing. Sneak reduces a vehicle's stealth. Or, well, it increases the stealth value. It basically doubles it. Meaning that 1.25 now goes up to 2.5. This value stacks with the stealth provided by forests. So yes, a Recon T90 is just as stealthy in a forest as things like Force Recon or any recon infantry. This is ridiculous, because like this means that recon infantry, which I'd like to point out people generally use, I'd like to point out that people generally use recon infantry for fights in forests, and now there's a tank that can be just as stealthy. And most recon infantry don't get anti-tank weapons. The only ones that I can think of that do get anti-tank weapons off the top of my head are the Spetsnaz GRU, the Naval Infantry Resvedka. I think the regular Resvedka gets some RPG-26s as well, but those aren't going to do too much to the front of a T90. And Rangers RRC. Everything else generally gets anti-infantry launchers. I think the VDV Spetsnaz might also get some ATGMs as well. or at least get some kind of anti-armor launcher. Actually, I want to pull up something. I want to pull up a picture. Let's see if I can find it. I need pictures. Oh, here it is. This is a picture that someone got on the, or that someone posted on the Discord. That's a Recon T90. This is a Recon T90. It's just sitting out in the open on an asphalt runway, and nobody can see it. It is spectacular, and I love it so much. I genuinely hope, like, look, okay, give sneak to the TUA, please, just do it. And I can already hear the pro-Russians going, oh, but the TUA has laser, blah, 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 American bias. Okay, yeah, sure, shut up. I don't care that the TUA has a laser, okay? If given the choice, I would take sneak over the laser any day of the week. Because honestly, sneak is going to be far, far more useful than the laser. At least for me. Maybe other people can get more use out of the laser than sneak. I'm going to be using sneak a lot more than the laser. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised they even put sneak on the recon tanks to begin with. I mean, heck, I'm surprised that this thing doesn't get sneak. It'd make more sense if this thing got sneak. This, like, it doesn't. It's this. Honestly, here's, like... Excuse me. To be entirely brutally honest, I see things going one of two ways. Either, number one, they take sneak off of the T90M because it's just OP. Or two, they give sneak to the TUA. And as much as I really, really want them to give sneak to the TUA, it more than likely they're probably going to end up taking it off of the T90M. Because here's the thing, okay? The sneak on the tank isn't necessarily the bad thing. But think about it like this. What if you took a T90M, or even two T90Ms? You park them at the edge of a forest to just observe, the same way that you would use recon infantry. Okay, that's fine. Like, that's a very expensive way of doing it. You're sacrificing 620 points for something you could do for like an eighth of the cost. But what if you wanted to conduct an ambush? You now have a 1,400 meter tank gun with various different types of ammunition on top of what is literally a tank, so it's a pretty durable platform in its own right. You can conduct a pretty mean ambush by just lining one or two of these things up. So, oh boy. This is why I honestly think they're either going to put sneak on the TUA so it's fair, so it's something that both sides can do, or they're going to remove it off of the T90M. I mean, the fact that they put sneak on 6 Russian vehicles and only 2 US ones is kind of weird, because the US is generally, like, the game is asymmetrically balanced, and generally the US has the advantage in the recon tab. So, I mean, to be fair, Russia does have more reconnaissance vehicles than the US does. At least if I'm not mistaken. Then again, that might be due to just Russia having fewer reconnaissance assets as a whole. I'm not going to count them out, but I'm pretty sure Russia... Actually, no, I think Russia... Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, so the U.S. does have more reconnaissance vehicles, although some of those are troop transports. If we count the ones that aren't troop transports, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so Russia has slightly more reconnaissance vehicles that aren't troop transports than the US does. But still, I want them to give the sneak ability to the TUA. Do it. Please do it. It would be so much fun. It would be so much fun. But like I said, primarily due to things like the ambush scenario that I described a few minutes ago. Ow, I just hit my knee on my desk. How that hurt. But like I said, primarily due to the ambush scenario that I just described, I think they're either going to remove sneak off of tanks entirely, and honestly that's probably the more likely option of these two, or they're going to give it to the TUA. I want them to give it to the TUA, but they're probably going to remove sneak entirely. Also, I think I saw one person on the Discord. I think I saw one person on the Discord suggest that they give the TUA HE, and I assume that's an ammunition. What I assume is an ammunition loadout similar to the Set V3, and I wouldn't mind that either. I suppose it would make a bit more sense for the sake of the ambush, but that's of course assuming that they give the TUA sneak, which they're probably not going to do. Or rather, I expect them to remove sneak off the T90M rather than give it to the TUA. Anyway, Striker Spec. The Striker Specialization suffers a lot from the tank damage increase, as the entirety of its vehicles are now killed by tanks in 2 shots instead of 3. Several buffs have been made to compensate. All Strikers now do not lose speed anymore when they're up armored. The ESV and the ICV, the Javelin upgrade price has been reduced from 35 to 30, so now it's 115 fully kitted out instead of 120. For that matter, go to Striker Cab. Where is the ICV? So this ups it to 175, or to 75 instead of 80. The MGS had its base price reduced by 5 points to 85, but the Mark 19 upgrade has had its price increased from 0 to 5 points. So if you fully kit it out, it's still 125, but if you decide to forego the Mark 19, it's only 120. Which is actually the same as the M60. That's a point, because I'm pretty sure the M60 only has a 1,200 meter range in its gun. Yes, but every other 105 the US has is a range of 1,300 meters. Yes, so the M60... So basically it's the same price as an M60, but you get... But it's faster. It's got the same it's faster, it's got longer range optics, and it's got a slightly longer ranged gun. It's got APS, but it's not heavily armored. Or it's not armored much at all, for that matter. Okay. Scouts gain an extra AT4. I'm honestly not sure what that's going to do, but alright. A marksman rifle has been added to troopers, so that's basically makes them slightly more oriented towards standoff combat, which they kind of already were because they have an M240 rather than M249s. Airborne snipers have been moved to Striker Brigade, and they've just been renamed snipers. The new unit, Airborne Riki, with 2 possible customizations, has been added to the Airborne specialization to replace Airborne snipers. Now, honestly, I don't really think it was necessary to move snipers over to Airborne, because I think what they could have done is just, like, copy this, put it in Airborne, but make it so that when you upgrade, like, just copy this, and then copy this, remove the M203, so it's just an M4A1, put it in Airborne, and then make it so that when you upgrade their rifles, the M4 gets replaced by an M7. I think they could have done that. But Airborne Riki, this is just like your basic reconnaissance. And instead of having an option between standoff and fire support like they did in the PTE, it's now just an option between standard and next generation weapons. Which, they aren't all that expensive. I mean, only 55 points for this isn't too bad. Unfortunately, they don't have the AT4 HP. It's just the AT4 RS. Like they did, or they had the AT4 HP in the PTE, and it made them the only other infantry unit in the entire game, aside from Rangers RRC, that actually had that. But now they only have the RS version, which kind of sucks. I suppose if you wanted to double them up and use their Maws as like to ambush things with, you could. But if I'm going to be entirely honest, a 4-man unit is small in general to do any kind of fighting. So, I mean, the fact that they come with a light machine gun isn't bad, and the DMR doesn't suck either, but if you're using them at range, I guess it could be useful, but that's about it. And when I say range, I mean at maximum range. Although, in general, recon infantry are valuable, unless you're using them in forests, which I know a lot of people do. But aside from that, recon infantry are much more valuable by what they can see rather than anything that they can shoot. And the Baltic Battalion is getting buffed. We didn't want to create an overpowered specialization, reinforcing the win rate of the already superior US. Thank you. So this specialization was released with cautious values. Now that we have a better picture of its capabilities, we can improve some of its weaknesses and make it more attractive. And for anyone who is dense enough to not realize, when I said thank you there, I was making a joke. The infantry MG3 has its resupply times fixed. It was apparently 10 times longer than it was supposed to be. I honestly didn't notice, but okay. The RBS 70, the weapon priority has been, it says fixed here, I guess it was a bug that the launcher wasn't picked up if the soldier carrying it died, but okay. Okay, so I don't know how to pronounce this. It's Estonian. I don't know how to pronounce it. But them and the SE Scouts now carry an extra spike, so that's 5 spikes and 4 spikes respectively, or spike SRs specifically. The SE Soft's C90, the C90 has had its penetration increased to 300 meters, or to 300 millimeters, which is hilarious, because that's actually the same as I think it's the A2 law that the reservists get. The KASP reservists. Speaking of which, their rifles have had their range, the range of the rifles and the rockets has been increased to 400 meters. The Leopard 2 A8 AP pen has been increased from, I think it was 720 to 450 to 760 to 475. So basically, the pen value has gone from the M829A1 to the M829A2. The M829A1 you get on the A2 Abrams and the Heavy Common. The A2 you get on the SEP. But they have actually swapped the round out, which is nice. Although they did increase the price to $260 to compensate, which is, I mean, that's still fine for what you get. A fully upgraded Leopard 2A8, still 335 points for top-tier armor, top-tier optics, an APS, and a very versatile ammunition loadout. The CV9035, the Mark IV upgrade, has had its price reduced by 20 points to 50, so now it only costs 140 points to fully kit down instead of 160. Which is nice. The Vilcus had its base price reduced to 90 points, and now it's only 125 fully kitted out. The Javelin team had its base price reduced to 75 points, so that's actually... Basically, the upgrade has gone down to 0, because that's the same price as the Milan. And the Spike LR team has had its price reduced as well to 100 points, so now the upgrade is only 25 points instead of 35 points. And that's about it for this. So... remove that. So remove that, thank you. Because there's one other thing I want to look up real quick. And that's the hotfix. This was released on the 3rd, and it just fixes a couple other things. So they made the infantry resupply time slower, but they also reduced the resupply time for RPGs. Basically, at least according to this, it's only ATGMs and manpads that are meaningfully affected by this change. I still don't like the fact that it's infinite. I think it would have been better if it had a fixed value like it did in the PTE, but that's just me. They fixed a bug where the PAC-3 and the PAC-3 MSE could not target ballistic missiles. Yes, I tested this. No, they could not target the ballistic missiles. Yes, I pulled up the campaign mission Heavy Rain, and the Patriots got destroyed from the onset. It was kind of funny. The C90, they apparently fixed a bug with the range that gave it an 800 meter range, which was hilarious, although not intended. They fixed an interaction between this Striker ATGM, or for the Striker ATGM, they fixed an interaction between APS and Sneak. I'm not entirely sure what that was. The T-72B has had its Gunlash ATGM's damage fixed. They fixed some of the optics for the Cherry Berries and the Ranger Stingers. They actually fixed the bug that I mentioned earlier with the aim time for the Hellfires on the Grey Eagle and the Reaper. And the Sturmoviki, the reload time for the RPG-7V has been slightly reduced. Now, to cap this video off, I want to demonstrate something that I mentioned earlier. And this is going to be very, very funny. Because I mentioned earlier that the Fletcher rockets on the Striker RV is capable of eating a 3-pack of, or is capable of eating a full, it's capable of eating a full salvo from, or is capable of eating 4 HARMs and 3 cruise missiles from an F-15EX. What is this? Don't need that. What is this? Do need that. So I don't need this. What I do need, however, is to go over here, take this, make that invisible. I was doing some testing with this earlier, just with this and a couple Patriots, and the result of my testing was that versus 2 F-15EXs, a single M-SHORAD and a pair of Patriots are capable of intercepting everything almost all of the time. There was occasionally where something got through, but generally everything was intercepted. Against 3 F-15EXs, usually the Patriots and the M-SHORAD lost, but they intercepted almost everything. Although I'd like to point out in those examples, or in the example against 2 against two F-15EXs, the Fletchers didn't actually fire all that much. Against three F-15EXs, the Fletchers would actually get a workout. And sometimes you would only lose one thing. Usually only one or two things would actually get through is what I'm trying to get at. Either that would be a harm that would take out one of the Patriots, because with the armor package, the M-SHORAD is actually capable of surviving a single anti-radiation missile hit. Or you would, or it would be a cruise missile that would just that would destroy everything. But generally, they would shoot down all but maybe one or two things. So, hang on. Let's see how this goes. Let's see how this goes with nothing but the Fletchers. Now, it's funny because on one of my previous attempts to record this video, with everything active, the Striker failed to intercept a cruise missile and almost got blown up and made me look like I had egg on my face. This is just dumb, and I love it. And honestly, it makes me it makes me wonder. It genuinely makes me wonder, because eventually they're going to introduce loitering munitions. That's on the roadmap. That's something that they want to add. So I assume things like, for example, the Russian Lancet, the U.S. Coyote, or maybe the Israeli Harpy, which I know is a loitering munition that has been bought by a number of nations. But one thing I'm genuinely interested is, where's Striker Cav? There's Striker Cav. I'm sure is I wonder if the Fletcher rockets are going to see a lot more use against loitering munitions. Because if I'm going to be entirely honest, I was very iffy on the Fletchers when the Fletchers were introduced. Like, honestly, the Fletchers as an option is one that I was, again, iffy on. I don't understand why the Fletchers is on Delta. Like, I think you should just remove it, give the guy an MRGGA, and maybe give the squad as a whole a couple of MAWs. I don't understand exactly what the Fletchers are for. Like, I mean, I get it if you want to use them for popping support assets like artillery or air defenses, but why is that on Delta? That would make more sense if it was on something like STT. Or better yet, just make another reconnaissance unit with maybe one or two Fletcher launchers. Like, another 6-man reconnaissance unit. Or just give it as a loadout option for STT. Like, include a third loadout option here. So, excuse me. I was never convinced about the Fletcher launcher on Delta. And for the same reason, I was never convinced about the Fletcher launcher on the Warpig. You can't use it while it's on the move. For some reason, it only does half the damage as the one on Delta, even though I'm pretty sure the blast radius is significantly bigger. Well, it's slightly bigger. It only does half the damage for some reason. You can shoot it out further than the one on Delta, I'm pretty sure. Yes. And okay, yeah, the one on Delta has slightly longer range against helicopters. Cool. Hopefully Delta wouldn't shoot at helicopters at all in the first place. But I don't know. I don't understand what you're going to get with the Fletcher on the Warpig. I even tested it for use against helicopters. No, it doesn't work. Like, I toyed with the idea of using it as a quasi SHORAD, and that didn't work. So I never understood what you would get from the Fletcher. I kind of understood it on the M-Shored. Like, okay, you have 12 of them, so I guess it would make a bit more sense. But still, I was never convinced. And now that they've made this change, though, and everything is hilarious with exactly what you can do with now that they made this change, though, and what you can do with the Fletchers with intercepting things like cruise missiles and anti-radiation missiles now is nuts. The Fletchers actually serve a role as far, or they actually serve a role now. Is what I'm trying to get at, and failing miserably. However, if they introduce things like loitering munitions, I can also see them serving a role. Because I'm kind of expecting loitering munitions to act like cruise missiles, maybe like a combination between cruise missiles and ATGMs. Maybe you take a loitering munition, or even a group of loitering munitions, and you tell them to search an area. So you can send them to an area like you launch cruise missiles, and then they loiter around that area and attack anything that shows up in it. And in that sense, I would see gun systems like the M230 and systems like the Fletcher being pretty useful against that. Now, I don't know if that's what they're going to do with loitering munitions. That's just my speculation. But, yeah, I think these are actually useful now. And honestly, I wouldn't mind an option to customize both sides of this. So you can take, like, double Fletcher launchers, or double Fletcher pods, for lack of a better term, for a total of 24. So, but that's just me. Honestly, I'd be kind of interested to see an option to take, where is where's the linebacker? There it is. To take a version of this with the with a Fletcher launcher. Although you might have to raise it up slightly so it doesn't clip through the vehicle model. So, anyway, and I've given speculation to things like what if you were to take something like the Avenger turret here and mount it on a MTV chassis, and then let us customize what's on it, so you could do something like an M2 Browning, or an M230, or the Stryker M-Shored style 12-pack Fletcher launcher, or the Stinger pods, or maybe a pair of Sidewinders, a la the launcher on the Chaparral. But that's purely just my speculation. Anyway, that's pretty much going to be it for this. So, still wish they gave the TUA the sneak ability, because I think sneak is going to be hilarious. Not particularly happy about the not particularly happy about what they've done to the changes with the Booker, the T-14, and making vehicle supplies infinite. And although, to be entirely honest, the change on the T-14 isn't too bad. It doesn't fit with what they said was the idea behind autoloaders. The Booker, I think they went a little bit too far when they nerfed that. We will see if they decide to revert some of those changes. Vehicle supplies, I already said that I don't particularly care for that being infinite, although I do like the idea. Anyway, though, that's going to be it for this video.